for most, but light winds in northern Scotland means we could see some slow-moving, intense, even thundery downpours here during the afternoon. Temperature-wise, again around or maybe a touch below average for the time of year, struggling to get into the low 20s for most places. A dry, sunny start across eastern England during Wednesday, but then the showers get going again through the day. So again, it'll be a case of dodging the downpours, perhaps not as many, not as intense, but still some lively showers moving through. And again, things on the cool side in the breeze with temperatures high teens or low 20s at best.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
A new twist in the BBC presenter scandal as the alleged victim calls the claims rubbish.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 11th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Ellie Costello.
And leading our news on this Tuesday morning, the parents of the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal say they stand by their claims after a lawyer representing the youth said nothing inappropriate or unlawful took place.
Well, it comes ahead of the release of the BBC's annual report today, which will see Director General Tim Davie face questions from the press. The report details pay deals the corporation has with its biggest stars.
Rishi Sunak will tell NATO leaders in Lithuania today to increase spending to deter Russian tyranny as he urges them to meet their defence targets.
The government has been forced to U-turn on key parts of the illegal migration bill after it suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. The changes include limits on detention periods for children and pregnant women.
Wimbledon heats up as Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic make it through to today's quarter-finals. Paul Coit serving you up that.
Yes, morning. And Novak wants matches to start earlier. There's a new hero in town at Wimbledon. And also a little piece of advice, it's not a good idea to smash your racket on the floor at match point.
OK, take your word for it. And the question is, how long are the July downpours set to continue? Latest weather updates throughout the programme.
There's been quite a bit of heavy rain overnight, and there'll be more downpours through the day today. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
So here we go. Welcome to you, Ellie, today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It was a bit hit and miss.
Yeah, and what she means is she was away, she was abroad.
I was, can you tell?
She was travelling via EasyJet, and I see here EasyJet cancelled 1,700 flights. And you got in at what time last night?
Well, I got home at about 1:15 this morning, and I was
looking
up.
good on it.
I was up at 3 o'clock. I had an hour in makeup. Trust me, I didn't look good before that.
I had 3 hours.
Did you? Is that all you've managed to sleep?
In makeup.
All 3 hours of
makeup.
Yes.
2 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. Top story this morning. A lawyer representing the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal has said claims they were paid tens of thousands of pounds for explicit pictures are rubbish.
Well, in response, the parents said they stand by their claims and accused the BBC of ignoring testimony given to them back in May.
Now, this comes ahead of the release of the BBC's annual report. That happens today, and that details the pay agreements the corporation has with its biggest stars. Once published, Director General Tim Davie will face questions from the press.
Well, let's speak now to crime and policing commentator Danny Shaw. Good morning to you, Danny. Really good to see you this morning. I mean, the Times describes this as the latest twist in this tale. We were talking about wrongdoing, alleged wrongdoing by a BBC presenter, and now we're talking about whether wrongdoing actually took place. This victim saying nothing happened, nothing was done that was wrong. What do you say to this?
It's all a bit of a mess, isn't it, Ellie? And I always thought that when this story emerged, that there was more to it, that it wasn't as straightforward, perhaps, as the Sun suggested and as people were thinking. I think the fact that payments allegedly of £35,000 were being made by this presenter to this person suggested that perhaps there was more to it. And so it would appear, from looking at what has been released in the past 24 hours, it seems as though that there is, clearly a relationship breakdown between this young person who's now 20 and their mother and stepfather. And that they have very different accounts. The young person saying nothing illegal's gone on, nothing inappropriate has gone on, there's no story here. And there may be reasons as to why that young person is saying that. And on the other hand, the parents is, clearly saying that they believe that this young person has, to some extent been exploited or, potentially has been a victim in all of this. Relationships are very complicated, particularly when people are in their teenage years. And I think we have an example of this. But I think the critical factor, or the really interesting factor in this, is the fact that the stepfather is apparently saying, we went to the police and the police said there was nothing that they could do, no crime had been committed. Well, that clearly explains yesterday's statement from the police saying that at the moment they haven't launched an investigation because they're not sure that criminal offence has been committed. And it may be that this is in that area of, private life, messy, difficult, potentially very embarrassing, may call into question this person's reputation, but not necessarily something that actually gets you over the sort of the criminal offence barrier, as it were.
And legal representation is very expensive, Danny, and suddenly this young person has legal representation. One wonders how that is being paid for. We've already seen in the Philip Schofield case that he actually paid for the person who was linked to him. He paid for their legal representation for a while. The whole thing just gets tawdry. It's very, very disturbing. It's hard to know where it goes from here, and indeed, once named, if the presenter in question can ever have a career again.
Yes, look, I think you're right. It is tawdry. I mean, I think there are clearly questions. You're right about, you know, if this young person's playing for this legal firm, which I've read is based in the St James's area of London, so presumably quite an expensive legal firm. Are those legal fees being paid by the presenter? Question mark. That's certainly, I suppose, a possibility. I think the other thing that's interesting, Eamonn, is this does raise some questions for the Sun newspaper. The young person, through their lawyer, said, "We told the Sun that there was nothing in this. We denied the allegations on Friday, and yet the Sun went ahead with its story." The Sun's entitled to do that, but you would expect a responsible newspaper to at least print a denial. If that is the case, that the Sun was told on Friday by this young person through their lawyer, this is rubbish, this is nonsense, you would expect the Sun to at least put a paragraph or two putting that denial in their newspaper. So I think the Sun has got some questions to answer as well about all this. But the person today who will have questions to answer, and who will have to answer them, is Tim Davie, the Director General. What a coincidence of timing that this comes on the one day in the year that is set in the calendar, set in the diary, when he appears before the media to launch the BBC's annual report. It's always quite a difficult time because that list of presenters who are paid, in my view, extortionate sums of money is released. That always raises some uncomfortable questions for Tim Davie. Well, he's going to have a lot about this affair. I would imagine if he's been advised by his press people, he will probably make some kind of statement or comment right at the beginning of that press briefing and try and get that subject out of the way, and then deal with the issues he wants to tackle in his annual report.
And Danny, what would you say to people who would say, look, this is between a BBC presenter and this young person. Why is this the responsibility of the BBC, as you say, on this day of all days where they present their annual report? Why does it become their problem?
Well, it becomes their problem. It is their problem at the moment, firstly, because the story is dominating the news and is in the headlines about someone who is a high-profile person, a presenter, supposedly a household name, who is at the centre of this, and it's something rather murky and unpleasant. Allegations that the law has been broken on one hand, claims that a lot of money has been paid to a young person's account on the other hand. So that's a problem. If no law has been broken, then it becomes a question about whether what has gone on, I suppose, in his private life has somehow besmirched the reputation of the BBC, whether some of it, crosses over into the line of, whether his work has been affected and so on. And the BBC will have to look very closely at that. It may be at the end of all this, the BBC takes the view that a period of time off air is sufficient, and that person, the presenter, can come back and sort of rebuild their career. I mean, my own view is this is very difficult to handle. I'm not denying that it isn't, but I think the BBC and the presenter would be much better to come out, make a statement, a joint statement together, identify themselves for the sake of all the other people whose names have been dragged through the mud, who've had nothing to do with this, and because I think the BBC owes licence fee payers and viewers a bit of transparency. Because I think when you get to a position where you're a household name, watched by millions of people, you have a slightly, I think your entitlement to privacy is slightly different from the average person in the street. That's my view. And so I do think that the BBC, it can't go on sort of just denying, denying who this person
but
is.
Danny, also especially, there's talk now that parliamentary privilege may well be used to get this name out there. And I'm looking at the front page of the Daily Mail today, and they say that 1 in 6 of us actually know who the BBC presenter is, and that's a mockery of the laws and the privacy laws that are out there at the moment. I just wanted to point that out. That is making a headline today.
Yeah, and Danny, I did want to ask you, because you were at the BBC for over 30 years, weren't you? I mean, what's your sense of how it's going down from the inside of the corporation, and especially for Tim Davie, because it does seem like he's been in crisis mode since the start of his tenure, really. Even in the last few months, you've had the Gary Lineker drama, Richard Sharp, the chairman, who stepped down. There's been job cuts there. I mean, it's been a very, very challenging time.
I think every DG has a crisis or two a year, Ellie. I mean, that's my experience. There's always something that's in the news. I don't think Tim Davie really, I don't think the Richard Sharp affair was really anything to do with Tim Davie, to be honest. That was sort of a little bit out of his control. That was more about, I think, the government in a sense. Certainly the Gary Lineker affair landed on his plate. I think the mood in the corporation, from what I hear, I don't think is great. Because my experience is that when these matters affect people who are highly paid presenters, high-profile individuals, household names, staff would like that person to be treated the way that everyone else is treated. Okay. And if there's any sense that that person was given special treatment when the complaints were raised back in May, and that a producer would be treated differently and would, let's say, be brought in and would be suspended immediately, if there's a sense of differential of treatment, staff will be absolutely furious about that. They want people to be treated exactly the same, whether they're a highly paid presenter or a young researcher just starting out their career. And if there's any sense that that hasn't been the case, then staff are absolutely enraged about that. But I also think there'll be a lot of disappointment and upset that this is dragging the BBC into the headlines for the wrong reasons and allowing the people who want to knock the BBC the space to be able to do it and to have a go at the corporation.
Okay, Danny, really appreciate your perspective and take on things. As Ellie pointed out, Danny had worked for the BBC for 30 years. He is a crime and policing commentator. We'll say goodbye there. Thank you very much, Danny, for all of that. Danny Shaw. And just to point out again, the story today, here's how it's moved on today. The young person involved in the accusations against this BBC presenter has said their mother's claims are rubbish. This young person now has a lawyer, and the lawyer wrote a letter to the BBC throwing doubt on the story that you know so far. So that's the latest situation there. 6:14 is the time.
The Prime Minister will today tell world leaders to increase their military budgets to deter Putin at a major NATO summit in Lithuania.
The Prime Minister will further support for Ukraine with a recommendation that all members spend 2% of their gross domestic product on defence. That is currently only done by 1 in 3 NATO leaders. Looking forward to talking to Professor Scott Lucas on this. Scott Lucas is a Professor of International Politics at University College Dublin. Good to see you, Scott.
Great to be here with both of you.
Scott, how do they get away, if the requirement is 2%, how do they get away with paying 1.3? And who is getting away with it?
Well, in 2014, NATO set a target, and I emphasize a target of 2% of GDP in defense spending for all its members by 2024. So, in fact, we're still not at the date that NATO has set. At the time it set the target, I think only the United States was actually at the 2% target. Now you have, as you mentioned, I think 10 countries, 1 in 3 who are at or nearing the target, and more are expected to pass it by next year. So what Rishi Sunak is doing is he's highlighting, we need to stay the course, as it were, especially in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think that's an important thing to highlight, which is that NATO summit this week will talk first and foremost about the Ukrainian counteroffensive to liberate territory. They'll talk about a path for Ukraine's accession to NATO, but there's the wider question of the defense of all of NATO, especially on the eastern flank, if Vladimir Putin stays in power despite failing to conquer his neighbor.
Why is the USA then resisting Ukraine becoming part of that NATO club?
There's a little bit of misleading coverage, not by you two, of course, but of this issue of NATO, of Ukraine's NATO accession, to say that there's divisions. There aren't on the fundamental, for example, that Ukraine's path to accession should start, but after you achieve the priority of defeating the Russian invasion through a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive. In other words, you keep your eyes on the immediate goal of military assistance to Ukraine, political and economic assistance, while it still tries to liberate the sections of its country in the east and south, some of which have been occupied since 2014. Then you talk about accession. There are differences about the pace. In other words, should it be done very quickly and accelerated? Should it be done through normal processes? There appears to have been a breakthrough yesterday. The Ukrainian foreign minister said that the NATO summit has reached a consensus, or will reach a consensus, that NATO can bypass a normal provision. That's called the MAP paperwork. A bit technical, but they can bypass this paperwork, which normally takes several years to complete. And instead, like Sweden and Finland, who of course have been accelerated to join NATO, Ukraine can follow that path.
But there are some NATO nations who are reluctant to go that far, aren't they? They worry that if you promise, almost a near automatic membership for Ukraine after the war ends, then that gives an incentive to Russia to continue the fighting or to escalate it.
Yeah, I think there are officials in Germany in particular who have said, look, perhaps we shouldn't accelerate the process. However, I think you're seeing, day by day, sort of a contest within the German cabinet. I think Foreign Minister Baerbock, Defense Minister Pistorius are much more sympathetic to an accelerated path to membership. I think that you will have discussion this week that will start with the step of saying we are going to step up military assistance to Ukraine. We are going to step up support for the counteroffensive, what you've referred to as, Israel-style support. But then I think you're also going to see a consensus, which is, yes, this path will be accelerated. Remember, at the outset of discussion on tanks, there were some countries that said, no, you can't send these tanks to Ukraine. It happened. At the outset of the discussion of sending longer-range missiles to Ukraine, including British Storm Shadows, there were countries that said, no, you couldn't do that. You have seen countries who, after weeks, sometimes months of discussion, who have finally come to the idea of, yes, not only do you stay the course in supporting Ukraine, but you have to step this up. And I think we'll see the same thing regarding Ukraine's position with NATO.
Scott Lucas, appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. We've got to leave it there.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The government's illegal migration bill returns to the House of Commons after the draft legislation suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. MPs are to vote on the changes made by the upper chamber, which include new amendments to address safeguarding concerns for women and children.
Reforms to sick pay could cut absence levels and provide a £4.1 billion boost to the economy. That's according to new research. It comes as the number of people off work due to long-term illness remains around record high levels. The analysis found that higher rates of employer sick pay provide longer-term benefits, as 1 in 3 workers on sick pay are currently living in poverty.
And we'll have the latest unemployment figures at 7 o'clock this morning. More than 80% of shoppers are worried about supermarket shrinkflation. This is according to a new survey. Large majorities of British people are now turning away from their favourite brands as a result of smaller sized items at original or higher prices. 37% of shoppers also reported noticing staple food items such as eggs and tins being regularly unavailable. That shrinkflation thing, it really annoys me.
Grinds my gears as well.
There was me eating some custard creams yesterday, and I just couldn't help but notice they just weren't the same size. It was the same biscuit, but smaller.
What, as in the actual biscuit had shrunk?
The actual biscuit, it was,
Wow.
so, you know, it's whatever that size, but it's not that size anymore. Nothing is that size anymore. Absolutely nothing. I got a toffee crisp the other day. Now, toffee crisp used to be a chunky, decent-sized bar. Nope. It's like the size of your finger.
It's the thin thing that I have noticed that. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. See, I've heard about fewer things in the packets. I've noticed with crisps.
Oh.
I mean, you open a packet of crisps now, it's all air.
It's all air.
It's like 5 crisps at the
2
bottom.
grabs and it's gone.
I know.
Yeah.
It's awful. But I haven't heard about the product actually getting smaller.
Yeah,
That's a new one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep my eyes peeled.
Wagon wheels, forget it. When I was a kid, a wagon wheel was the size of the moon.
Your head.
It was massive, absolutely massive. You couldn't get your mouth around it or anything else. Now a wagon wheel, it's like a Cadbury's button or something now. That's it, it's gone.
Is that just you growing up? Maybe.
Might be.
Maybe.
Could be.
Perspective.
But you know, do they think we're stupid? Do you think we don't notice the difference? I mean, there you see the reaction against that. People are saying, oh, well, stuff this. If you're selling me this at this price, same price or more expensive and it's smaller, we'll not bother anymore. So people are turning away from the products. And I tell you what, if we took a supermarket basket of products, all of them would be affected by shrinkflation.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because the manufacturers think you are stupid and that you won't
notice.
know. And it's, well, it is what it is.
No, yeah. And I think that's where people are realising, aren't they? It's hitting them in their pockets and in their shopping baskets.
And in
that's
their
where you can
mouths.
see it, and in their mouth, exactly.
The government's been forced to U-turn on key parts of the illegal migration bill after it suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords.
Yes, the changes include limits on detention periods for children and pregnant women.
This comes amid a surge in small boat numbers in recent weeks. 13,000 crossings this year, now the same as it was this time in the whole of 2022.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this exclusive report.
Crossings are now down 20% compared to last year. This is proof that our deterrent strategy can work.
It was a bold claim just a month ago, the Prime Minister down in Dover insisting his Stop the Boats plan was working. But since then, a surge in small boat arrivals has exposed that claim to be at best premature. The latest arrivals at Dover Harbour come amid an improvement in weather conditions, which has seen more than 1,500 people brought here in just 4 days. In fact, the number of arrivals for the year so far has reached the 13,000 mark. That figure is the same as the 13,000 who crossed at this point last year. Maritime experts who know these waters well say the initial 20% reduction in crossings was purely down to bad weather and not government policy. Despite the clearly increasing numbers of Channel migrants, the Home Secretary has reiterated her determination to stop the boats.
Well, the Prime Minister and I are absolutely clear. We've got to stop the boats. That's why we're working very hard to introduce new legislation. Last year, there were 45,000 people who arrived illegally. It's costing us £6 million a day in hotel accommodation. This has to stop.
The surge in small boat arrivals is just the latest setback to the government's plans to tackle the Channel migrant crisis. The Court of Appeal ruled the deal to send some of those arriving to Rwanda is unlawful. And in Parliament, the Lords are continuing to block the progress of the government's illegal migration bill. Weather conditions in the Channel are set to get choppy in the days ahead. But we're heading for the peak months, where flat camp conditions will pave the way for thousands more to cross. And if those figures continue to increase beyond last year's totals, Rishi Sunak will face the prospect of failing to meet one of his government's key priorities. Mark White, GB News.
With that, we'll bring you the weather picture on this Tuesday. Let's go to Alex Deakin.
That warm feeling inside, from boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a damp start across the southeast. For most of us today, it's a mixture of some sunshine, but also plenty of showers. There's the rain that's moved in overnight, bringing a damp start across East Anglia and many southern counties of England. It is fizzling out, however, and then we are going to see showers developing pretty widely across the country. Now, for most, there's enough of a breeze to move those showers through, but they could still be heavy for a time. In northern Scotland, though, particularly in the northeast, the winds are quite light, which means the showers could turn into slow-moving thunderstorms that could cause some issues. In the sunny spells, temperatures just about climbing into the low 20s in most places, but feeling cooler with the breeze and when the showers come along, of which there will still be plenty around through this evening's rush hour. They do tend to fade across England and Wales overnight. There will be further rain crossing into parts of Scotland, however. And then on Wednesday, for many, it'll be a dry and a bright start. We'll also start with temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but some sunshine certainly likely over the Midlands and eastern England to begin with tomorrow morning. However, there'll be showers and quite a bit of cloud elsewhere, and then the showers just develop and become pretty widespread once more from late morning onwards. Perhaps not quite as intense as the downpours later today, but nevertheless still some pretty lively showers moving through on a brisk breeze for most of tomorrow. A little drier perhaps in the south, where temperatures again getting into the low 20s, for most high teens.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Do stay with us. We'll have all the latest from Wimbledon with Paul Coit as Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic make it through to the quarter-final.
It's 6:30 still to come on today's programme. The NHS has seen a significant spike in bites from bugs, right? So a lot of us seeking advice on this one. So if you've woken up with a lump on your arm or leg or somewhere else, and you're wondering what's causing it, it could have to do with the change in temperature. Mozzies love me, they just love me, goodness me. We're going to be talking about that one. Then 6:45, find out what to look out for and how to tell the serious from the manageable, whatever that means. And after multiple videos went viral showing passengers fighting or causing disturbance, at 7:20 we'll ask if you should be banned from the airlines for behaving badly on a flight. Get in touch the usual way. Maybe you have been chucked off a flight. Maybe there are people who you would like to see being chucked off a flight. Maybe your flight was delayed because of hoodlums. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet at gbnews. My friend is in the studio now, Paul Coit, for a look back at well, what has happened and what's going to happen sports-wise. And I suppose we can't leave Wimbledon there.
Well, yeah, I mean, Wimbledon, we're well into the second week now, Novak Djokovic. So he's now been saying that the game should be starting earlier because for some reason, I mean, it happens every year, but it's been more noticeable, hasn't it? That there's games that are going on late.
I think it affected Andy Murray, for instance. I think he would have won his match, except he had to come back the next day.
Sport is all about momentum.
Yeah.
And when the momentum's with you, as it was with Andy at that point, and then it's like, well, the curfew is now, it's 11 o'clock, or it's, you know, we're not going to get the next set in, we've got to all come back tomorrow. This has affected Djokovic as well, 3 days in a row. So it's taken 2 days to finish his game. Now he's got to move on to his quarter-final, where he's playing Andrei Rublev. So it does affect things. I think, really, I mean, we've said about this, there's 2 ways of dealing with it. We can start earlier. I think probably they're thinking TV audience, 1:30 on centre court, 1 o'clock everywhere else. Why not start it, you know, at 11 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
I can't really see what the problem is.
And if you live around Wimbledon, is it really a massive inconvenience? And, you know, I'm not saying it isn't, you know, because if you've got to get up the next day or whatever it is it just too festive around your house where you are?
If you move to Wimbledon, I mean, with respect to everything, firstly, if you're that close to the All England club, I mean, look at the size of it. I mean, the actual place is enormous. And people move there, and you're not going to... I don't believe that anybody would move to Wimbledon around the area and close to Southfields and be going, oh, no, I've bought a house, but what am I going to do around July? It's going to be a disaster. Yet most people would move there and think, this is great. And... also, the money that people can make by renting out their houses as well around that time of year. So probably most of the people that are at work are probably away somewhere else anyway. But just play on. I mean, I know the Australian Open is 4 a.m, 5 a.m. until games finish. It's probably too late. Yeah, they just play on through the night.
I used to live in Wimbledon. And you're right, you factor it in. You say there's the 2 weeks of the tournament and you make other arrangements so you're not around. What's much more inconvenient is that this bike ride that they do in London, and they close the whole of London down on a Sunday, and you think, well, how do I get from Heathrow Airport? I've just come back from Belfast. How do I get from Heathrow home? Yeah. You just can't do it. And
that's what affects people. It's roads.
Yeah, there's other things.
If it's Wembley Stadium, and if there's a football game, and then you've got how many thousand people leaving there, and you're thinking, well, it's going to be noisy. You know, the Wimbledon crowd are not really going to be that noisy. They're not going to be singing Andy Murray's name and waving flags and shouting, jumping up and down, are they?
Wembley's a very interesting situation because they have mass developed so many apartments around Wembley. You just cannot move for apartment blocks around Wembley now. So it always was difficult to get in and out of, but now... It's pretty bad.
Exactly. So there we are. So they're saying earlier start. It doesn't seem to be any question that they can move later. I don't know why. So maybe it's something they should look at. Carlos Alcaraz as well. He beat Matteo Berrettini, who has been amazing through the tournament so far. Won the first set, and then Alcaraz came back. And Berrettini hadn't lost a service game in the whole of the tournament so far. So it's still looking like that Alcaraz-Novak Djokovic final, I think, for me. So I think that's what we're going to see on Sunday.
Look, on the transfer market, I just don't understand how there's a valuation of 100 million plus for Harry Kane in England, and yet Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga, they think they can get him for under 70.
What are they playing at? Who do they think they are? It's not going to happen.
But would they get away with it?
No, it's not going to happen. No. Spurs will not sell. Firstly, Spurs do not want to sell. There's Harry there. Spurs don't want to sell Harry Kane. He's got a year left in his contract. And if they do, it would have to be some ridiculous amount of money. When I say ridiculous, I mean he's worth 100 million pounds.
But if they don't sell, he could walk away for free this time next year.
He could do. But then there's the roll of the dice is whether Ange Postecoglou had his first press conference yesterday, talking about the fact that he'll talk to Harry Kane and say, look, this is what his vision is, because I know for a fact that Harry Kane and his advisors want to know what the plan is as far as Spurs are concerned. It's still up in the air. So who knows? You know, things might turn around. They may have a great season.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the hope that kills you with any football fan. But
he might be worth 100 million to keep him if they won a trophy.
Correct. That's right.
And shirt sales, etc.
Can you imagine what the Champions League is worth? To actually qualify for the Champions League, you probably make that money anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not worth selling for anything less than that.
We've got that time of the year where new kits are coming out for the season ahead, and the Chelsea one's caught your eye.
Yeah, it has. Well, have a look at this. It's a very nice. It's plain. It's going way back. Now there's some current players there. You can see Raheem Sterling there, and also Dennis Wise is in there, and also Roberto Di Matteo is there as well.
Very plain.
And it is very simple. But have you noticed there's something missing across the middle that you would see on every...
Sponsorship?
Yeah. No sponsorship. So the way they are at the moment is that it was Three, the phone company. That's ended. Then there was talk that it was going to be Paramount Plus TV, but the Premier League would not be happy of that because it's rival TV stations and they're not rights holders, so that's out as well. But there's the shirt. I mean, I've been looking back on some of the... It's almost how things... it goes back again, and then that's how fashion is. You know, and if we look back to one of my favourites, look, this is one you probably would have loved.
It's in about 77, I think.
77, Manchester United, that away shirt. That was Admiral... There's Lou Macari, the classic Admiral shirt. Admiral, who were founded in the early 70s. They started with Leeds United. There's the Spurs one from 1978 as well, with Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa. So, yeah, there's a great story, you know, about the Admiral shirts. You know, they started with Leeds, went to England, and then everybody had them.
But as you say, the big omission is the advertising across the chest there. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the main thing, and that's where the big money comes from. And now they've started with the advertising on the sleeves, etc. as well. So much money is being made. But it's almost like it's gone back now, way back almost to the 60s, that those shirts are so plain.
Well, you'll go forward to 20 past 8.
Always.
We'll see you again, my friend. For the moment, thank you very much indeed. Please do stay with us as we'll be going through the latest developments from the BBC scandal. That in the papers. Nicola McLean and Martin Dobney with those and their views on that after this. We'll just bring you the front pages of the papers on this Tuesday morning. Here's how they shape up.
The teen at the heart of the BBC Star scandal says the claims are rubbish. That's on the front of the Express today.
But their parents have hit back with the father saying the BBC are liars. This is Sun exclusive, they're claiming.
Now, 1 in 6 of us know who the scandal-hit BBC star is. That's according to a poll conducted by the Daily Mail.
Telegraph: Ukraine is to be offered a NATO light protection by the UK and the United States.
And The Times says hotels are being given millions to reserve beds for future migrant arrivals.
We didn't give them millions, but we have reserved them for this morning. Going through the papers in more detail, Mr. Martin Dobney and Nicola McLean. Very nice to see you both. Nicola, we're going to start with this BBC presenter story. 1 in 6 of us know who it is. And you're going with the Sun and what they're saying today. The family of the youth involved spent an hour telling the BBC their fears in May.
Yeah, so the family are obviously standing by their claims. They say they only spoke out to help save their vulnerable addict child. They say the BBC are liars. The Sun's obviously come out and said, or their child has come out and said that nothing illegal took place. I don't believe for 1 second that the Sun would have exposed this if they don't have absolute proof that it happened. So I totally believe that this happened, and, you know, I don't know why this person is being protected and hasn't been named.
Well, here we see another trait, Martin, that we saw in the Philip Schofield situation, that suddenly high-powered, very expensive lawyers appear on behalf of the young person.
Yeah, and if nothing untoward happened, why suddenly is a top brief involve denying the Sun claims? I want to echo what Nicola said. Having worked in the newspaper industry for a long time, the burden of proof now is so high to get this story away. You cannot, like in the old days, simply put a kiss and tell out and, oh, if you get sued, never mind, we'll pay the bill. Post-Leveson inquiry, the burden of proof is so high, there's no way on earth they'll be able to run a story like this without the absolute proof in front of them. And that includes, they're saying, the bank statements and now the photographic evidence and also the video evidence. There's an almighty smell going on. And today is the day annually where they announce the BBC presenters' wages, which will be kind of overshadowed by this. But I think the two conversations join up, because the next conversation is, if 35,000 quid, as is claimed, is being sent to a young person via a BBC presenter, that's our money. That's taxpayers' money. It's the licence fee payers' money. I think the public have a right to say, not only are these wages stratospheric, but how it's being used. And if that money is being used for legal defences to protect them and keep their identity a secret, we've got an almighty mess. And I think, once again, it makes people ask about the value for money around the BBC licence fee.
Well, Nicola, you were asking why the star hasn't been named yet. I mean, I'm like you. I think this is only a matter of time. This is going to happen. But let me ask you this: bearing in mind that you'll be one of the 1 in 6 who know the identity of this person, would this affect you as a viewer? Is there any win situation for the presenter involved? Could they come back, or would this be career-ending? What you know so far? Whether a crime was committed or not, I'm not saying not. There's no doubt that this is a tawdry episode. Could you look at the presenter in the same way again?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the presenter, sits there morally reporting stories, and I think I can't look at him in any moral way. I have to be careful because I keep on wanting to say things that I shouldn't say. No, absolutely not. And, you know, if the papers are reporting that the person involved was 17, I believe it, and that is illegal. That's against the law. That is having explicit pictures of a minor.
OK. Martin, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, that's the technicality. So while, same as with the Schofield case, the age of consent is 16, we don't know if sexual relationships occurred, but legally that's the parameter. But sharing explicit imagery, the age is 18. Irrespective of female or male. So if images like that have been shared, which is what the parents are claiming, and the son claims to have it, then a clear breach of law has happened. So irrespective of a matter of taste, a matter of law has been breached if this evidence comes through. And as I said before, I just do not believe that a newspaper now could speculatively punt this out there without being destroyed legally.
And from your point of view, as a viewer and as a performer, because you could find yourself on a programme that this person was interviewing you on, your whole tone and outlook towards that person, would it have changed?
Well, we're social media friends, and I've met the individual, and it's very surprising that it's this individual. It's quite a shock. But no, I don't think you can live the veneer of, on the one hand, being person A with a very happy family life, and person B, if this story comes through, I think it would be a career-ending tackle.
OK, well, it will be very interesting later on, won't it, with that release of the BBC annual report and what the Director General, Tim Davie, has to say then. Martin, let's have a look at another big story today. And this is about Ukraine, obviously, at the NATO summit taking place today. Potentially Ukraine being offered NATO-light protection. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating kind of fast-forward to what many people in the West would have wanted a long time ago. Ukraine has always been eyed as a kind of frontier territory, a border between East and West. And a lot of people would have wanted Ukraine to join NATO earlier. Of course, before the war, this would have been seen as an inflammatory act of provocation. And in fact, Donald Rumsfeld, the US Defense Secretary through the Bush era, very moderate kind of guy, always said it would be a mistake to expand NATO. So this interim offer is a similar situation to what NATO currently offers to Israel. They pay $4 billion a year to Israel to maintain its strategic advantage in the Middle East. So this isn't full-blown membership, but it is a promise from USA, UK, Germany and France, the four biggies, if you like, in NATO, to offer military training, armament and a continuity of Ukraine military supremacy, which will allow it to defend itself. It's membership in all but name. It's a membership in a way that won't allow Putin to say you'll be in expansion. But I think it's a very, very delicate political situation.
OK. Here we are in the summer weather, Nicola, and there's a story in the paper today about picnics and what you put in picnics. First of all, could I ask you, are you a fan of a picnic? I mean, when I was young, I used to, when you were dating and things, you do the old picnic, but it could be quite an insect-ridden... Wasps. There's always wasps around picnics, which sort of puts me off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of wasps, but I am a fan of picnics, as long as there's some Prosecco involved.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
you like Prosecco.
Which is well on the list there. Because
is it?
Yeah, they're saying that, where is it? There's something about sparkling wine.
Is a yes.
Yeah, it feels less naughty than just cracking open a bottle of white, doesn't it? You know, it's bubbly, it's summery. I love a picnic with a bottle of fizz, absolutely. I mean,
so what goes in that, Martin? We look at the 10 alfresco must-haves, and I would agree with most of them. The top one, which I'm not so sure about, is a healthy homemade salad.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would be an essential picnic ingredient for me, but Scotch eggs, cake, scones, fruit salad, egg mayonnaise sandwiches, all in there?
Yeah, so I think you and I, Eamonn, fall into a similar ballpark. And that is, no, I like the things that they say are falling out of trend. No to sausage rolls. No to pork pies unless they're artisan. Artisan means overpriced.
Yes.
It means an overpriced pork pie that you buy from some deli, but really you just want a nice pork farms pie.
What they've done with, there's absolutely nothing wrong with sausage rolls. What they've done with sausage rolls is that it's like potato crisps, how they're spoiling those. You get sweet chilli and pepper crisps with beetroot in them or whatever it is. I don't want that. I want cheese and onion, smoky bacon, whatever, prawn cocktail, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're doing the same with sausage rolls, that they put apple in it and chives in them and all sorts of rubbish that you don't want in it. Just give me a plain sausage roll and they'll be fine.
See, I don't think there's any such thing as a bad sausage roll. I like a bit of apricot in it too. Maybe I'm kind of losing my way as I'm softening at the edges, but I do like a bit of apricot. But sausage rolls, basically, the trend is go healthy, go homemade. I was just saying, who's got time to make a cake? Turns out you guys do.
Well, no, I do like a Victoria sponge. I do like that, but I wouldn't make it myself.
I'm with you, Nicola.
I make homemade sausage rolls as well.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. The boys love them.
Very good.
Yeah.
Right, so we want to put that out to you folks. What would you put in your picnic? And the next time the guys are back, we're going to be talking about that. What is an essential? I think the prawn cocktail that you get in Marks and Spencer's.
Oh, that's nice.
I think that's quite decent to have something like that. So GBVs at gbnews.com. More of today's stories. They shape up like this with the time at 6:51.
The government's illegal migration bill returns to the House of Commons today after the draft legislation suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. MPs are to vote on the changes made by the upper chamber, which include new amendments to address safeguarding concerns for women and children.
More than 80% of shoppers are worried about supermarket shrinkflation. The new survey suggests large majorities of Brits are now turning away from favourite brands as a result of smaller sized items at original or higher price. Right, let's stop the news there and let's talk about a significant spike in the number of people seeking advice for insect bites. Joining us in the studio now, Dr. Ophelia. This is not your real name, is it?
Yeah, Vera.
Vera Itch.
Yeah.
Itch.
No, Verach.
Verach. I'll just see ITCH there, and I'm thinking bites and itch and whatever. But lovely to see you, Doctor, anyway. Are we being bitten now as the weather gets warmer by different things?
Well, there's always a spike increase in bites over the summertime, and because of the weather conditions that we've had recently, there's been a premature spike in reporting of bites earlier this month and last month.
And Ophelia, when should we worry about insect bites? Because do you know what? I've got one on my leg right now, actually. I was away over the weekend. I've got a really nasty bite on my ankle.
Yeah.
When do we know if it's a problem? When should we be calling a doctor, and when is a bite just a bite?
So the majority of bites are completely harmless and they will go away after a few days. But occasionally you can get significant allergic reactions to bites, so you might feel a bit short of breath and unwell, and the size of the bite might become disproportionate, and in that case that you should seek medical advice. There are also tick bites, for instance, can cause Lyme disease, and they have quite a typical bullseye appearance, so that's another thing to look for.
So, Doctor, more and more people are ending up going to accident and emergency, which, however inconvenient a bite would be, it probably doesn't require that level of attention. What would your advice be to people who've got, a raised mark and it's itchy? What would your advice be?
So it can be quite uncomfortable, but you can buy things from the pharmacist that would help. So antihistamines. So you can also buy weak corticosteroid cream. So you can buy 1% hydrocortisone over the counter. That would be helpful for most insect bites. And only if it really spreads after doing those measures, I would advise seeking
When I was young,
advice.
my mum used to make up baking soda and put it on, which would take the heat out of something. Or
you're not supposed to do that.
Oh,
so.
There you are. So
well, there you go. We've been told.
Yeah.
And what about getting bitten in the first place? How do you avoid that? Because I was using spray this weekend and that didn't work, did it?
Yeah.
I'm a magnet for bites. I believe it's people who are very sexually charged.
Oh.
So I'm told.
The mozzies love you.
The mozzies love you. Is there something in your blood that they go for?
Some people are more prone to getting bites, and there are things that we can do to help reduce that. So sensible clothing, wearing closed shoes and not sandals, keeping the windows closed at night time, and not having sugary food out or uncovered food at night time, and all of these things can help reduce. And also bright coloured clothes and perfumes and scents can attract insects.
I'm doing it all wrong.
All wrong.
I wear open shoes, I wear perfume, I'm often around sugary things. That's the problem.
But thank you, Dr. Ophelia. Really appreciate that. Dr. Ophelia is a consultant dermatologist.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wish we had more time, but the biting season is upon us. Let's get a forecast, and here's why it's upon us. Alex Deacon will tell you.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Morning, I'm Alex Deacon. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a damp start across the southeast. For most of us today, it's a mixture of some sunshine, but also plenty of showers. There's the rain that's moved in overnight, bringing a damp start across East Anglia and many southern counties of England. It is fizzling out, however, and then we are going to see showers developing pretty widely across the country. Now, for most, there's enough of a breeze to move those showers through, but they could still be heavy for a time. In northern Scotland, though, particularly in the northeast, the winds are quite light, which means the showers could turn into slow-moving thunderstorms that could cause some issues. In the sunny spells, temperatures just about climbing into the low 20s in most places, but feeling cooler with the breeze and when the showers come along, of which there will still be plenty around through this evening's rush hour. They do tend to fade across England and Wales overnight. There will be further rain crossing into parts of Scotland, however. And then on Wednesday, for many, it'll be a dry and a bright start. We'll also start with temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but some sunshine certainly likely over the Midlands and eastern England to begin with tomorrow morning. However, there'll be showers and quite a bit of cloud elsewhere, and then the showers just develop and become pretty widespread once more from late morning onwards. Perhaps not quite as intense as the downpours later today, but nevertheless still some pretty lively showers moving through on a brisk breeze for most of tomorrow. A little drier perhaps in the south, where temperatures again getting into the low 20s, for most high teens.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Well, look, very nice to have you on board. Please do stay with us this morning because
We'll have the latest on the BBC presenter scandal as the young person at the centre of the story calls the claims rubbish. A new twist in the BBC presenter scandal as the alleged victim calls the claims rubbish.
hello there, 7 o'clock is the time. Very nice to have you on board. Eamonn and Ellie here. Tuesday, the 11th of July, breakfast on GB News.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The mother of the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal says they stand by their claims after a lawyer representing the youth said nothing inappropriate or unlawful took place. Our home editor, Mark White, will bring us the latest.
Where the BBC's Director General is preparing to launch the corporation's annual report. That press conference, of course, is normally dominated by presenters' salaries, but on this occasion there will be one topic and one topic only that those journalists want to hear about.
Rishi Sunak will tell NATO leaders in Lithuania today to increase spending to deter Russian tyranny as he urges them to meet their defence targets.
The government has been forced to U-turn on key parts of the illegal migration bill after it suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords.
I mean,
the changes include limits on detention periods for children and pregnant women.
And how long are the July downpours set to continue? Have you been affected by downpours?
Yeah, when I got off the plane last night, chucking it down.
Straight away?
Yeah.
Goodness
What a
sake.
welcome back.
Yeah, there you go. Latest weather update coming your way shortly.
There's been quite a bit of heavy rain overnight, and there'll be more downpours through the day today. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
Well, our top story on this Tuesday.
My experience is that when these matters affect people who are highly paid presenters, high-profile individuals, household names, staff would like that person to be treated the way that everyone else is treated. Okay. And if there's any sense that that person was given special treatment when the complaints were raised back in May, and that a producer would be treated differently and would, let's say, be brought in and would be suspended immediately. If there's a sense of differential of treatment, staff will be absolutely furious about that.
Okay, we were just a bit early there with an interview with a man called Danny Shaw, who is a commentator on political matters, who had worked for the BBC for 30 years or so.
And giving us a sense of how it's going down from inside the corporation, because, of course, a lawyer representing that young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal has said claims that they were paid tens of thousands of pounds for explicit pictures was rubbish.
In response, the parents say they stand by the claims. They accuse the BBC of ignoring testimony given to them back in May.
Well, Mark White is at Broadcasting House for us now. Good morning to you, Mark. This has got a lot more complicated, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I mean, we're into the fifth day of publication of articles relating to this story in the Sun newspaper. And yes, there's more revelations coming out, but in terms of the central allegation and how true or otherwise that might be, we don't seem to be much further forward. Indeed, it took quite a significant turn last night when these lawyers for the young man at the centre of these allegations said, actually, from their point of view, this story was wrong. Rubbish, they called it, and said that they had contacted, the young man had contacted the Sun newspaper prior to this report going to press to say as much to them. So there are some questions for the Sun newspaper to answer as well, in terms of whether they did receive information from this young man to suggest the story was not true, and what they did in response to that, because there seems to be no mention of that in the article that hit the papers on Friday morning.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Let's now bring in Andy Barr. Andy is a crisis PR expert. And Andy, we're seeing from the stories in the papers today that the fight back has begun because a lawyer has been employed to represent the young person.
Good morning. Yes, the BBC have come out firing. In crisis comms, it's all about trying to get on the front foot. And in this case, the rhetoric in some of the BBC articles is a lot stronger this morning. They're pointing out factual errors and discrepancies in the reports in the Sun about who said what and when. So we've seen a total shift in approach by the BBC right now.
And it's going to be a very interesting day, isn't it? I mean, the timing is pretty incredible in that sense. It's the release of the BBC's annual report today, so we are going to see the Director General take questions from the press. And usually, as Mark White, our correspondent, was just saying, that would usually be about presenters' salaries. That's usually what this day would entail. But of course, today it's going to be on one topic only. It's going to be very, very challenging, isn't it, for Tim Davie today?
Oh, very much so. It's going to be a media disaster for the BBC. You know, they're going to dream of those awkward questions about Gary Lineker when really they're talking about, a huge scandal that threatens to rock the actual fabric of the organisation. So yeah, what's historically been a troubled day for them in terms of presenter salaries is actually going to now become a much harder set of questions and a much more difficult one because there's so many legal connotations to what they do and don't say.
You know, Andy, as a good point about what you do or don't say, you are a crisis PR expert. Who's facing the biggest crisis, the BBC or the presenter involved here? Because you see, a lot of people would say, whatever the faults of the BBC are, they didn't have this relationship, however appropriate or inappropriate it is. And when they find out who the presenter is, it will be quite shocking, I think, in terms of image as to the relationship that there has been, the acquaintance that there has been here. So who is facing the bigger crisis, the presenter or the BBC?
I think I'd add three people in there. I think you've got the Sun as well, because obviously they've took a huge risk. They've run this story in good faith. Obviously, they will have sense-checked it. Now, obviously, the BBC is at huge risk, but you never know what your employees get up to. And as humans, we're strange folk and we do strange things. So the BBC can probably have a bit of wiggle room, as we say in crisis comms, whereas the presenter is on a very tricky uphill battle.
You know, what about other presenters and reacting to this? I mean, I haven't worked out really if it's a good idea to deny involvement in this or to say nothing and let sort of due process take its course. What would your advice be to male presenters that think or have been accused or think that they may be accused in this whole game?
Well, it's very difficult when the police are involved. We need to understand exactly what they're thinking and whether they're going to potentially go to the CPS with this. If they do, then obviously they can't really publicly say anything. If they're falsely accused, which we saw obviously over the weekend, it's hugely difficult because obviously social media can be a bit of a cesspool, and you need to be careful in how you address the issue so as not to escalate it more. But I think they did the right thing in coming out and saying, look, it's not us. But as you'd always say in crisis comms, everyone thinks there's a magic bullet. The magic bullet is just telling the truth.
So in crisis comms, what would your advice be to the BBC now, especially on a day like today? Because there are going to be questions of what they knew and when. The parents are claiming they had an hours-long discussion with the BBC back in May.
Well, I think that's the issue. That there's two problems here. Historically, they've not pressed the panic button quick enough. They've not got their legal team and crisis communications people involved. It turns out the Director General wasn't briefed until Thursday last week, if we believe that. So yeah, really, you've got to look at the escalation process. And also, the media trainers are going to earn their money today because this is going to be an absolute car crash of a press conference.
Mm-hmm. Andy, what would your professional advice be to the presenter? Because there could be an argument that says, if you've got nothing to hide, come out with this and say, look, this is me they're referring to, but let the police investigation happen. I can't say anything till after that, because they would be in control of the situation, you could argue. I mean, I just cannot see how this name will remain a secret for much longer. What would your advice be to the presenter? Say stumm or stay, visible, put your head above the parapets?
I think they have no choice but to keep quiet whilst the legal and police investigation is going on. Now, obviously, when it does move to a slightly advanced stage, if it does, because obviously the main crux of the defence at the minute is this is a frivolous false accusation. So they don't want to justify a rambling as they're sort of positioning it as. They want to try and keep quiet at the minute. I can fully understand that. But when more details come out, they are going to have to go into typical crisis comms mode, try and get ahead of the story, apologise where they can, and where it's not sort of making them legally vulnerable, and then try and, work out if they do have a defence and how they may be able to get back into the job market.
Andy Barr, it's very interesting listening to you, really. Thank you very much indeed. Andy's a crisis PR expert. Thank you.
Yeah, a really interesting point he made about the Sun newspaper in all of this as well. Keith has just written in. Good morning to you, Keith, saying, in my view, the claim by the lawyer of the victim, the Sun is now going to have to produce all of their evidence. Failure to do so will destroy the paper's credibility. Really interesting.
OK, the time now 11 minutes past 7. And the Prime Minister will today tell world leaders to increase their military budgets to deter President Putin at a major NATO summit in Lithuania.
Yes, Rishi Sunak will back further support for Ukraine with a recommendation that all members spend 2% of their GDP on defence, which is currently only done by 1 in 3 NATO leaders.
Let's speak to former NATO commander Rear Admiral Chris Parry to find out more on this. Commander Parry, what state do you see NATO in at the moment, and how would you see it evolving?
Well, I think NATO's in pretty good shape. You've just seen Turkey, who's been a bit of a recalcitrant member recently, come back in and say, we're happy to escort grain convoys coming out of Ukraine. They've also said that Sweden can now join NATO. And I think NATO is showing a united front in the face of Russian aggression, particularly in regard to Ukraine.
Really important, won't it, at this NATO summit, this show of strength from all 31 countries. Ukraine will be at the very centre of this summit.
Absolutely. It's the biggest aggression that we've seen since 1945. Russia remains a clear and present danger, not only to Ukraine, but every country that is bordering Putin's regime. They're desperate at the moment. You can see at the top of the Russian regime that things are falling apart. I'm one of those that believes we're in a power transition in the Kremlin at the moment, and that Putin himself is probably a front man only for the sort of people that are really in charge in Russia at the moment.
What sort of people would you think they are, Rear Admiral?
Well, if you look around, they are the people who come from the former KGB, FSB element. They're the Secret Service people that, frankly, have been supporting Putin for some time now. And if you look at the Prigozhin revolt, that essentially was a cry for help for one of Putin's supporters saying, look, I'm still here, I'm still a power player, don't ignore me. So I think we're in for a period of real instability within the Kremlin. And I think you'll see some people emerge who've come from that background. People like Patrushev, who is a former FSB head. His son is the Minister of Agriculture. You've got the Prime Minister, Mishustin, manoeuvring, I would think. And I think you'll see some people emerge you haven't even heard of, who've been operating in the background and will be looking to take over. I keep saying to people, if you've seen Armando Iannucci's film, The Death of Stalin, that's the sort of thing that is going on at the moment in the Kremlin.
Gosh, so does that mean Ukraine in or Ukraine out of NATO?
No, it means Ukraine with a post-dated check right now. You can't really take in a country like Ukraine, which is in active conflict with Russia at the moment, and say, look, it can be a full member of NATO, because Article 5, which means an attack on one, means an attack on all, would apply. What I think we can say is that sometime down the track, when you've got a peace settlement and the borders are settled, Ukraine will have then a route into NATO. My own view is the most they can hope for in a peace settlement early is that their borders will be guaranteed by NATO, but full membership's going to have to wait. There'll be a lot of golden words, I think, over the next couple of days, but there is no question that Ukraine will be helped indirectly by arms supplies, training, all that sort of thing. But I'm afraid the route to membership, as I said, is a post-dated check.
And this is what's being discussed this morning on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Essentially what you're saying, which is a NATO light protection, which is going to be discussed at the NATO summit, which is essentially membership without Article 5, isn't it?
No, I think essentially what that means is we're not going to let Ukraine lose. I think what people have to remember, if Russia loses, all their soldiers go home. If Ukraine loses, they lose their country. And that's the key point. We mustn't let Ukraine lose, because if Ukraine loses, Russia will be emboldened under whatever regime takes over. And some of our other countries up in the Baltic region will be under threat, because we should be in no doubt that Russia is still there. It'll come back again at some stage, and without serious change of political culture in Russia, it remains a serious threat to Western Europe.
Rear Admiral Chris Parry is a former NATO commander. Thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Thank you.
The time is 16 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Figures just released in the last 15 minutes show that unemployment rose to 4% in the 3 months to May, and that's up from 3.8 in the previous 3 months.
The government's illegal migration bill returns to the House of Commons today after the draft legislation suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. MPs are to vote on the changes made by the upper chamber, which include new amendments to address safeguarding concerns for women and children.
More than 8 out of 10 of us are worried about supermarket shrinkflation. Large majorities of people in the country are now turning away from their favourite brands as a result of smaller-sized items at original or higher prices. I think we should name and shame. I think from your experience out there, what you're buying in terms of shrinkflation, what have you noticed that is different? My shock this week was confined to toffee crisp and custard creams, biscuits. And those are just two. That could be anything. It could be, there's so many things. You talked about potato crisps. I mean, sometimes I get a bag of crisps now, and I don't know if the ruse is that it's healthier for you, whatever. They are so small.
They're small. Yeah, there's
so
5 in the
small.
bottom of the bag. It's a joke. Well, you've got them going on shrinkflation.
Right, OK.
And Jennifer's naming and shaming. She says, I had a Magnum last night.
Ooh.
50% smaller than it used to be. It was a fun-size product, a mini one.
But I
meant to be a big one.
think they do specific mini ones.
No, but this was meant to be a big one.
Was
But
meant to
it
be a
looked
big
like
one.
a fun-size one.
Do you know when they say, what was the advert? Let's have a Magnum affair.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, yeah, that's for the advert. That was the tagline. Let's have a Magnum affair. Let's have a half Magnum affair. Maybe that's what it should be.
But it's not just chocolate, apparently. No. Even a bigger con, apparently, is washing up liquid. And toothpaste. Things that you use much more. Washing up liquid and toothpaste.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Underhand and deceitful, says Jan.
Yeah. So the sizes go down, whether the prices stay the same or go up, but the portions will never get bigger again, and they will never, bring the price to where it should have been what we used to pay for things. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Lee says they picked up a pack of well-known butter, thought it felt light, checked the weight, it was 200 grams, used to be 250 grams. That's a 20% reduction for the same price.
But for the same price, that's the thing.
So cheeky, isn't it? It's
cheeky.
Sly.
I could use another word.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's too early for any
you're getting
other
the same weather for the same price here on GB News. Let's go to Alex Deacon.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deacon. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a damp start across the southeast. For most of us today, it's a mixture of some sunshine, but also plenty of showers. There's the rain that's moved in overnight, bringing a damp start across East Anglia and many southern counties of England. It is fizzling out, however, and then we are going to see showers developing pretty widely across the country. Now, for most, there's enough of a breeze to move those showers through, but they could still be heavy for a time. In northern Scotland, though, particularly in the northeast, the winds are quite light, which means the showers could turn into slow-moving thunderstorms that could cause some issues. In the sunny spells, temperatures just about climbing into the low 20s in most places, but feeling cooler with the breeze and when the showers come along, of which there will still be plenty around through this evening's rush hour. They do tend to fade across England and Wales overnight. There will be further rain crossing into parts of Scotland, however. And then on Wednesday, for many, it'll be a dry and a bright start. We'll also start with temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but some sunshine certainly likely over the Midlands and eastern England to begin with tomorrow morning. However, there'll be showers and quite a bit of cloud elsewhere, and then the showers just develop and become pretty widespread once more from late morning onwards. Perhaps not quite as intense as the downpours later today, but nevertheless still some pretty lively showers moving through on a brisk breeze for most of tomorrow. A little drier perhaps in the south, where temperatures again getting into the low 20s, for most high teens.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Right, very good. We're asking you after, I'm not allowed to say the break, but anyway, after the commercial ads or whatever it is, we'll ask if you should be banned from flying for bad behaviour. Yes, yes, yes. Chuck them in jail, all of them. I mean, you came in last night on an EasyJet flight. It was rammed to the hilt. It was delayed, which is a lot of them, and we're just going to tell you that they wiped 1,700 summer flights off their summer schedules, and they're blaming air traffic control on that one. But then when people are delayed, they get angry, they get frustrated, they drink, it all goes to pot. More after this.
Welcome back. Thanks for your company. The time is 25 minutes past 7. Still lots to come on today's programme.
At 20 past 8, we're going to have the latest from Wimbledon. Alcaraz and Djokovic both overcome challenges there in the quarterfinals today.
At 8:30, we'll speak to the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, about Labour's plan to use AI to get people back into work.
Everybody wants to use AI before AI uses you. That's the whole question.
Yeah, and then how do you control it? 'Cause it's moving at this momentous
AI, here's
speed.
what I want you to do. No, user, here's what you are going to do.
Don't, 'cause it scares me.
Well, I
The
think it
rate
should.
in which
I think it should scare you.
it's
It should scare
developing.
all of us.
All very scary.
You can join in any of our discussions, and we're talking about airlines next, and delays, and why people feel the need to tank themselves up with alcohol at airports. GBviews at gbnews.com or tweet at GBnews. So this is what we're talking about. Last weekend, 2 Ryanair passengers got into a fight over where they were seated. And even though staff stopped, they see, here it goes. Oh, what I'm laughing for. I mean, that's ridiculous. You just wish somebody would pull out a taser and, you know, some air marshal or something and send them to the ground. Anyway,
it's very, very distressing, isn't it?
Well, as a result of that, the flight was delayed by 2 hours. But would you intervene? I don't think so. I don't think you'd bother. Really?
No, but what should happen? Apparently there's been a rise in onboard brawls, and so today we are asking, should badly behaved passengers be banned from flying for life?
Could you ever imagine yourself in a situation where you would get involved in fisticuffs like that? That the situation would arise that you would be up there giving it that?
Well, no.
And no.
But I can see why it would happen, though, because I was on a delayed EasyJet flight last night. It was high stress. People were really scrambling to get in the queue. Everyone had their elbows out. Everyone was drinking. You could see how it would very easily turn violent. Yeah. I can see how it happens.
Well, the airlines are to blame. A lot of them are to blame, but all because they treat people like animals. There's no such thing.
Together.
Yeah, there's no such thing as an etiquette. I mean, that the way you board, you know, that by seat number or row number or whatever, and getting off is ridiculous because you should be able to, you know, say, I'm just using this, say, disembark from the front, say. So you let the front 2 rows go, then the next 4 rows go, and then the next 4 rows go, and whatever. But no, everybody runs up from the back, and they're allowed to. Well, journalist Ella Whelan says they shouldn't be banned for one little mistake. I think they should be chucked in jail, Ella, personally. But former airline pilot Terry Tozer says rowdy people shouldn't be allowed on planes in the first place. And do you have any examples of that, Terry? Have you any examples that you were about to fly and you said, no, not my plane, you don't?
Yes, I do. Some lads on a stag do that were well tanked up. And unfortunately, what happens is that the check-in staff don't want to take responsibility for barring them. Then they get to the gate and they let them go. And then the cabin crew are left to deal with them. And it's terribly unfair on all the frontline staff, as well as all the other passengers. Quite apart from the fact that the Air Navigation Order, which is law, says that it is illegal to be drunk on an aircraft. And they're, of course, opening the whole can of worms about who's selling them the alcohol.
Yeah, that's a question. That's a good question. But let me ask you, Terry, there must be a responsibility then on your shoulders or the pilot's shoulders. Is there any comeback, you know, if your plane doesn't take off or you don't allow 6 passengers on board, you could get into trouble, I'm sure, with your employers?
No, I don't think so. I mean, as a general rule, most sensible airlines, the captain is responsible. And, you know, if you deem somebody is unfit to fly or you don't want them on your aircraft, you just kick them off. I mean, there is a delay probably if their bags are already on and they've got to be found and removed. But frankly, that never really deterred me. I don't want people like that on the aircraft. It's not fair on the cabin crew or the other passengers.
And Terry, for those passengers we've just seen in that clip there, they are brawling in the middle of a plane. Do you think they should be banned just from that flight, or do you think they should be banned from flying?
Well, I'd ban them from flying. I mean, it's no different to any other offence. I mean, that kind of behaviour in a pub or a restaurant wouldn't be acceptable. Certainly not on an aircraft. I mean, in that case, it looks as if they're probably on the ground. But, you know, there are safety issues involved once you're airborne.
Yeah. But Ella, you think we may be talking a little bit harshly here. You think we should all calm down and you know, let these folks continue their journey?
Well, obviously, watching that video, it's hard to argue for calm if people are literally decking each other. And I don't think anyone in their right mind would condone that kind of behaviour. But I suppose what I want to do is ask why we get to the position in which stuff like this happens. There does seem to be a kind of a weird atmosphere going on at the moment. I'm thinking of, you remember that young man, Mizzy, and the whole phenomenon of his antisocial behaviour. There's kind of, you can talk about something happening generally where people seem to be forgetting normal sort of social etiquette and doing things that are antisocial. And I think part of the reason why that might be happening is because we have relied too heavily on formal bans from authorities rather than interacting with each other. Now, obviously, if two grown men are throwing punches on a flight, I'm not suggesting that it would be particularly sensible for anyone to get into the middle of that. But I sort of want to stress that there's, I think, as much as we can, the solution to these things should be informal and should be enforced by one another. So we put pressure on each other in society to act a certain way. So if you take a sort of more minor example, say there are people coming back from a flight from, I don't know, party destination like Ibiza, and I've been on a flight to Portugal with my son, my baby, with lads on it that were drunk, and I wouldn't want them to, and behaving in an irritating way, let's put it that way, and rather I wouldn't want them to be banned for life, but instead I got up and went down the aisle and said, for God's sake, will you shut up? And I think more if we can almost police each other in that way.
Well, do you think that was brave of you? I mean, you could have come in for a lot of abuse just for doing that. Did you feel safe enough doing that? Was there abuse hurled at you?
Actually, no, they're very apologetic once I sort of waved the baby in their face.
Yeah.
But I think that's the risk that we need to take, which is that, unless, I think this is particularly the case with young people, and young people do tend to act up a fair bit on flights, when they've had a bit of drink and it's their first time abroad or whatever, and they're not sort of as attuned to norms as us. I think it's the adult's job, rather than saying to the airlines or the flight crew or the police or whoever, come in and ban this behaviour. We need to be the ones that enforce social norms and say, actually, we don't act like this. Stop acting like this. Previous generations, it would have been categorised as you'd get a clip around the ear from a neighbour or an older relative or something to be kept in check. Obviously, we don't do that anymore. But a metaphorical clip around the ear, which is a chastisement from someone, and just
Ella, I just want to say, you've said a number of times there, you've talked about alcohol and drink and people being drunk. And Terry, you raised the question. You said we've got to ask the question where this is coming from, who is allowing this, and a lot of people, whether it's the airports, whether it's the carriers, they're making money off alcohol. So, Terry, what do you think we've got to do in terms of rethinking the passenger authority link with alcohol?
Well, I think the obvious thing would be not to be selling it at the airport. But, of course, we know that nowadays airports are retail parks, with a few aeroplanes and a runway. And, I think there's not a cat in hell's chance of that happening. But, there is also the issue that, there seems to be a libertarian view, individualism rules. We don't have to worry about other people. Look at the abuse on social media. That now seems to be becoming a sort of social norm. And I'm afraid it's the only way that I can see that you're going to influence people is if they realise that by behaving badly, that will be goodbye to their holidays in future. And in any case, it's a straightforward safety issue. We've already had one case of an Asiana man managing to unlatch a door on final approach, which deployed the emergency chute. I mean, we just don't want people like that on aeroplanes. I'm with you, Eamonn. Lock them up.
And what do you make of Ella's point then that the onus should be on other passengers to tell them to sit down and shut up?
Well, that's how you end up with the situation you've just seen on Ryanair. I mean, the cabin crew are trained to deal with people, but they are there primarily for your safety as a passenger. They're not just there to serve tea and coffee. They're there to ensure the safety of the passengers. And it's not fair to be putting them into a position where the passengers are joining in. I mean, basically, they shouldn't have to deal with people like that at all. I don't know why people have to get drunk before they get on an aeroplane, but the law is quite clear. You shouldn't be drunk on an aeroplane. And if there were enforcement, let's just say security at the boarding gate, and if people look a bit questionable, breathalyze them.
Yeah. Breathalyzing. Ella, you see, I think a lot of people get drunk because, truthfully, most people are quite timid or quite frightened, whether they care to admit it or not, about flying. And I don't know if your baby's still a baby or if your baby's a toddler now or whatever, but as the child gets older, do you worry about, you're not just looking after a baby now, you're looking after a young child who could be in the middle of a fracas, as we saw there on the Ryanair plane, or not? Is it something you take into consideration when you board a flight? Am I sitting beside dodgy people here or not?
My experience is that generally, I think we don't want to be too misanthropic here. An actual fact, I've been to Ireland and back many times alone with my son, which is, I tell you, I need the pint that I get at Wetherspoons before then to calm my nerves, never mind anything else, after getting through security with him. And people have been wonderful, carrying, the cabin crew picking him up, people sat next to him picking him up, letting me go to the toilet, all the rest of it. I think these incidents are condemnable, people fighting on planes, but they are, in the grand scheme of things, rare. Most people, even most people who might get a bit tipsy or whatever on a flight, don't end up fighting with one another. So I think that the caution I would preach is that we should be careful of making hard and fast rules on the basis of small cases. I absolutely sympathise with a pilot not wanting to have unsafe things happening on his plane. And you're absolutely right. Cabin crew shouldn't have to. My God, I mean, the job they have to do for not very much money, and then having to deal with louds is, no one wants to do that. Yeah. But the thing I just am stressing is that this kind of antisocial behaviour comes from our inability to interact with one another, and a lack of feeling of shame, that people would be looking at you and judging you, and also that you don't care about the people around you. And I think the way to make those people care about the people around them is for us to all become a little bit more involved and less isolated from one another.
Well, that's a nice thought. That's a nice thought, Ella. Thank you very much indeed. Ella Whelan and Terry Tozer, thank you both very much indeed. It's what do they say? It's doors to manual and cross-check for you two. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, fascinating discussion. Do get in touch with your thoughts on that. I'm sure you're going to have an opinion. I have a feeling it might be the same as Eamonn Holmes' opinion on that one. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, I just think if you're vulnerable on a situation, it's a safety situation, and you just don't need a lot of idiots doing what they do.
No.
I mean, there's no sense of decorum or rules or etiquette
with a lot
of people, It used to be you dressed up to get on an airplane, and it was such a big event. I think the fact is it's not a big event anymore. You can get an airline ticket at 60 quid or whatever, and, anybody can fly at any time. And maybe the specialness of the occasion has left us as a result. But I do believe the airlines and the airports, when you treat people like animals, they'll act like animals as well.
Yeah, really, really good point. Do let us know what you think about that. But do stay with us, as we're going to have the latest on the government spending on migrant hotels as we go through the papers with Nicola McLean and Martin Daubney.
It's coming up to 7:45 on this Tuesday morning. Eamonn and Ellie, breakfast here on GB News.
Yeah, we're going to go through the papers now in some detail with you this morning. We've got TV personality Nicola McLean in this morning and journalist and former Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubney. Good morning to you both. Very good to see you.
And it's migrants we're talking about. This is front page of the Times about how much money hotels are being given, Martin.
Yeah, so we all know, sadly, the case we're spending effectively £7 million a day on asylum hotels, but new figures out show we're spending £500,000 a day on empty rooms, buffer rooms, just waiting for illegals to come over to the country to cope with soaring demand. And we saw with Mark White's report earlier, there's 1,339 illegals arrived in the last 3 days, almost 13,000 this year so far, a record amount, and they need to be housed somewhere. And the bill, the illegal migration bill, which is going through Parliament tonight, they're trying to amend it. It was very heavily amended by the Lords, so it was softened so much that nobody who's arrived since March can even be sent back to their country or deported. A toothless bill to cope with a hugely expensive problem, a problem that will no doubt sink the Tory government. They've patently failed to take back control of our borders since 2016 onwards. And I think we're at the point now where we don't believe any political party has the guts or the spine to deal with this. And I think they're all as bad as each other.
OK. Nicola, let's have a look at the Metro, shall we? And this is a term-time holiday. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, so a father's taken his 7 children, 5 children, him and his partner, for an all-inclusive holiday. I don't know why I can't speak today, guys, sorry, which has cost £7,000 because he's done it in school time. If he'd have done it in the holidays, it would have been £12,000, which he just said he couldn't afford. Now, while I quite agree, because I take my kids out, I am that naughty person, I've never actually been fined. But then he goes on to say that if he's going to get fined, then striking teachers should get fined as well, which I just don't agree with. And I find it so odd that, you know, we know that we can't take our children's out in term time. He's doing it, but then he's trying to punish teachers for him not going by the rules.
That's interesting, though. So why don't you think that's not the same thing? So where they should be at school, but they're not?
So I believe that teachers have the right to strike for more money. I think teachers should be paid. I think it's diabolical, the amount they're being paid, and looking after our children, teaching our children and doing so much more. And he's just doing it because he wants a nice holiday cheaper, but teachers are doing it to fight for their livelihood. So I think there's a massive difference. And I think that, you know, he said that teachers knew the conditions and know the pay. If they don't like it, go and get another job. It just doesn't sound... It doesn't sound like a very nice guy.
Yeah, but you look at what happened in Tewkesbury yesterday, Martin. Yeah. We go to the Times and their take on this, the teacher stabbing and a teenager's being held for attempted murder of this one.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that you think wouldn't happen in Britain. It feels very akin to an American-style raid in a school. Teacher, a very well-respected, very, very well-liked teacher called Jamie Sansom, who's 27, was stabbed by a 15-year-old boy. Teachers were blockading themselves in cupboards, hiding, classrooms barricaded, pupils in fear of their lives. They had no idea what was going on. This kid was later found 6 miles away. 2 hours later, he's been arrested on suspected attempted murder. But I want to talk about how prevalent knives are becoming in schools. I did a bit of work on this for the Sun newspaper a few years ago. It's got much worse. So when you look at the numbers of stabbings in Britain, 49,000 knife crime incidents, a 10% increase year on year. 18% of all of those are 10 to 17-year-old boys. Kids. These are kids carrying knives. And I know for a fact, I'm mates with teachers, that knives are in British classrooms, even in primary schools, increasingly.
Any objection to those scanners, like as in an airport scanner that you would go through before?
So I was about to say that. So a few years ago, I did a school talk in Woolwich on a very sort of well-known problem school, and actually an excellent school that had taken really tough measures to deal with this. And it had precisely one of those things. I walked in, it's like an airport scanner. I thought, wow, this is quite overwhelming. And it was necessary, though, and it worked, and it kept knives out of those schools. It had barbed wire around it. Inside was ultra-disciplined, ultra-strict school, and the boys responded well to that. And I think we need to have a serious conversation and a cultural conversation. Look at the faces of those who are dying. We have a cultural issue. We have fatherlessness. We have a lack of discipline. We have county lines drugs issues. We have young people being groomed by bad guys into bad lifestyles because they want a fast route to the car, the trainers, the threads. And I think we have to do something desperately quick about knives in schools. And this case, I think, should be a wake-up call to the nation.
An hour or so after the attack took place, the police issued a statement which said they've been called to the scene of an apparent stabbing. What's an apparent stabbing?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the language that we as journalists then perpetrate, we carry what these people are saying. It obviously was a stabbing.
Yeah.
I don't know what other way you can describe it.
Yeah.
And an awful. So if we dance around this and don't call a spade on these sort of things, and think of the shock. I mean, the pupils who witness this and see this, and the other teachers. We were just, Nicola, the reason we started talking about this, of course, was this guy trying to sue teachers for their job, what they do in their job, but no one's paying you to get stabbed.
Absolutely.
You know?
Can you imagine the parents? You know, they were waiting outside the school for hours while the school was on lockdown. Can you imagine? You know,
terrible.
It's horrific. It's so worrying.
And this story is incredible, isn't it? Because he's a hero. He tried to break up a fight.
That's right.
That's our understanding of how he was stabbed in all of this. And as Eamonn says, you know, they're not paid for that. It's so much more than teaching.
Absolutely.
Putting themselves in danger.
Nicola, you saw the story we did there about air rage and people being abusive on flights and whatever. A separate thing is air traffic control. Story being reported today, 1,700 flights at the peak summer period being cancelled by EasyJet because of this. It's no joy to travel these days, is it?
No, it's really not. They're saying more than 180,000 passengers will suffer, and it's, as you say, in peak holiday times, just when England and Wales schools are breaking up, and that's why you take your kids out of school, but expect the fine and don't blame the teachers.
It's an absolute nightmare, honestly. I was in a queue of probably 500 people yesterday just trying to get my passport seen. Obviously, none of the electronic gates were working. There were only 3 people actually on the desks.
Yeah.
And then, as we were talking about earlier, you're all pinned together, caged together. People start getting argy-bargy. And we're not even in the school summer holidays. I mean, this is set to get a lot worse.
There's a lot of people to blame for this, Martin, you know, and the airlines, the operators have to be part of them, the airports. They treat people like cattle.
Yeah.
They don't make the experience special. It's not what can we do to help you. It's don't go there, don't stand there. Why are you wearing that? And the lack of space on these aircraft as well.
Yeah, it's increasingly becoming a dehumanising thing to do to travel, and you're treated as a unit to be processed for the maximum profit and the minimum return.
Yeah.
But on the notion of airline strikes, Ronald Reagan dealt with this within 6 months when he was elected US president in the 80s. And there was an air traffic control strike in America. He basically said, anybody who doesn't go back to work next week, you're all fired. He threatened to fire every air traffic controller in America, declaring it a strategic national interest. So the country needs it to operate effectively, business, politically, and it works. He crushed those unions within weeks. And I think we need to do the same, because restricting flights isn't just about swanning off on a holiday. It's about business, it's about loved ones, it's about existing economically, hugely damages economies. And I think we need to get tough on these unions.
OK, guys, what do you think, watching and listening at home? We're at GBViews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews. Martin and Nicola will be back in 40 minutes' time.
Now, if you're not off on your holidays, if you're staying here, what's the weather going to be like? Well, let's find out, shall we? Let's have a look at the Tuesday forecast with Alex Deacon.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deacon. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a damp start across the southeast. For most of us today, it's a mixture of some sunshine, but also plenty of showers. There's the rain that's moved in overnight, bringing a damp start across East Anglia and many southern counties of England. It is fizzling out, however, and then we are going to see showers developing pretty widely across the country. Now, for most, there's enough of a breeze to move those showers through, but they could still be heavy for a time. In northern Scotland, though, particularly in the northeast, the winds are quite light, which means the showers could turn into slow-moving thunderstorms that could cause some issues. In the sunny spells, temperatures just about climbing into the low 20s in most places, but feeling cooler with the breeze and when the showers come along, of which there will still be plenty around through this evening's rush hour. They do tend to fade across England and Wales overnight. There will be further rain crossing into parts of Scotland, however. And then on Wednesday, for many, it'll be a dry and a bright start. We'll also start with temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but some sunshine certainly likely over the Midlands and eastern England to begin with tomorrow morning. However, there'll be showers and quite a bit of cloud elsewhere, and then the showers just develop and become pretty widespread once more from late morning onwards. Perhaps not quite as intense as the downpours later today, but nevertheless still some pretty lively showers moving through on a brisk breeze for most of tomorrow. A little drier perhaps in the south, where temperatures again getting into the low 20s, for most high teens.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Stay with us. We'll bring you the latest on the BBC presenter scandal, the new developments there today, as the young person at the centre of this whole story calls the claims being made by the Sun rubbish. A new twist in the BBC presenter scandal as the alleged victim calls the claims rubbish.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 11th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Ellie Costello.
Thanks for your company, wherever you're watching or listening from. Leading the news this morning, the mother of the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal say they stand by their claims after a lawyer representing the youth said nothing more inappropriate or unlawful took place. Our home editor, Mark White, will bring you the latest shortly.
Well, I'm live here at New Broadcasting House, where the Director General, Tim Davie, is preparing to give the corporation's annual report. Normally a chance at the press conference to ask questions about presenters' salaries, but there's no doubt that today it's going to be dominated by this latest alleged scandal.
The Prime Minister will tell NATO leaders in Lithuania today to increase spending to deter Russian tyranny as he urges them to meet their defence targets.
The government's been forced to U-turn on key parts of the illegal migration bill after it suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. The changes include limits on detention periods for children and pregnant women.
And Wimbledon heats up as Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic make it through to today's quarter-finals. Coity will be here with all the sport.
Yeah, that final looks more and more likely between those two, and Wimbledon have got a new hero, and he's 6'7", which strangely is exactly the same height as me. What are the chances? What are the chances?
And could I say big man?
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry for the informality there from my co-host today, Coity. Mr. Coit.
Yes.
Mr. Coit to me.
That's okay.
I've heard you called worse.
I have been called a lot worse. Actually, in the last hour, I've been called
indeed.
Worse.
Thank you very much indeed. Coity. July. Well, we've had it all. We've had storms, we've had downpours, we've had sunshine. What are we going to have in the next week? Let's find out.
There's been quite a bit of heavy rain overnight, and there'll be more downpours through the day today. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
Those downpours overnight, they freshen the air, though. They create a nice atmosphere.
Yeah, I like that smell, don't you?
The smell of the grass and the hedges and trees and all that sort of thing.
There is a word for that, petrichor, I think it's called. Is that lovely rain smell after it's been really hot.
So that's got an official name?
I think it does. I looked it up once.
No.
If I've just remembered that, then that's...
Look it up twice.
Yeah, look.
What?
Petrichor, I hope I'm saying that right, a pleasant smell that frequently accompanies the first rain after a long period of warm, dry weather.
I never knew that.
It's nice to have a word for it.
Yeah. Good.
It's an ancient Greek word, petrichor. It's that lovely smell.
Lovely.
Every day's a school day.
Every day is a school day. Our top story this morning, a lawyer representing the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal has said claims they were paid tens of thousands of pounds for explicit pictures are rubbish.
Well, in response, the parents said they stand by the claims and accuse the corporation of ignoring testimony given to them back in May.
Now, earlier on the programme, we spoke to crime commentator and former BBC employee Danny Shaw, who told us that staff will be enraged if they suspect double standards at play.
My experience is that when these matters affect people who are highly paid presenters, high-profile individuals, household names, staff would like that person to be treated the way that everyone else is treated. Okay. And if there's any sense that that person was given special treatment when the complaints were raised back in May, and that a producer would be treated differently and would, let's say, be brought in and would be suspended immediately, if there's a sense of differential of treatment, staff will be absolutely furious about that.
Well, what is the mood? What is the sense at Broadcasting House? Let's go to our man, Mark White, who's there this morning. This is a big day for the BBC, Mark.
You're absolutely right, Eamonn. This is the day, of course, when the corporation launches its annual report, looking at how it's performed in the past year and looking to the future about what it needs to do in terms of modernising to ensure that it is offering value for money. On top of that, it's normally an occasion where the press home in on the issue of presenters' salaries. And while there may be, of course, some questions about that, there is no doubt that the press conference that will be held, usually, of course, by the Director General, Tim Davie, will be dominated by one topic, and that is this latest alleged scandal to rock the corporation. And we've had 5 days now, Eamonn, of splashes in the Sun newspaper, who broke the story originally on Friday. And although we've had new revelations with each newspaper headline each day, we are really no further forward in learning what the truth of this situation is. In fact, it took another very significant twist yesterday when the young man at the centre of these allegations, through some West End lawyers, put out this statement to say that the Sun story was in effect rubbish. Now, that prompted the Sun newspaper this morning to publish another article with the mother and stepfather of this young man standing by their story, and in fact saying that they had had an hour-long meeting with representatives from the BBC to highlight their complaints. Also, the Sun saying that it has seen evidence of bank statements and also apparently photographs captured from the internet that seem to back up what the parents are saying. But as I say, the Sun haven't given us much more detail to go forward that answers the truth of this. And I think we only need to look at where the Metropolitan Police is, Eamonn, with this story. And the statement that they put out yesterday, they've not yet launched a full investigation. They're merely scoping out these allegations to see whether an offence has been committed.
OK, Mark White, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there at New Broadcasting House. Let's go now to entertainment journalist Caroline Frost for more on this. Good morning to you, Caroline. Really good to see you this morning. So this is the latest twist and turn, really, in this story. Claims now from a young person at the centre of this scandal, saying the BBC presenter did nothing wrong. And then we've got the parents on the front page of The Sun saying they stand by their claims. This is getting very complicated, isn't it?
Really, really messy. As your correspondent Mark just said, this has been 5 long days in yet another era of firefighting for the BBC. I mean, I think the last time we spoke, we were discussing the fallout of Philip Schofield's departure from ITV. And now here we are on the other side of town discussing what exactly the BBC is to do. I mean, to my mind, as a long-time media observer, it has now become what it so often becomes, which is Rupert Murdoch versus the BBC. But obviously these claims are very, very serious, but as we've said in the last 24 hours, somewhat mysterious, with it's becoming a case of he said, she said. I mean, I think the story is going to have to break so that it can be made sense of, because all of these reporters, I mean, I saw a very sorry state of a BBC presenter trying to report on all of this yesterday. Very, very difficult for them. So at some point, I think it's like when the waters come, I feel like the rains need to come on this one a bit.
But Caroline, if the rains come and the presenter's name is released, what sort of impact or how do you think the public will respond to that? Because they will know who the presenter is, and how do you think it will change how they see this whole story?
Well, do you know, I've had a real an anecdotal Maury poll just among my friends, some of whom are in the media and obviously lapping all of this up and wondering which way it's going to go, and other people not in the media who I think it will reach into the heartlands in a way that other scandals, which we kind of gobble up because we live and know these people, I think this will make a difference. This is still, I mean, this question of legality is being argued by lawyers, by tabloid newspapers. I think whatever the legality, there is something that we call the ick factor, and I think that will remain. I don't know if this is the end of the BBC. This might not be, the beginning of the end, but certainly I think the highest echelons of the BBC, those highly paid execs, they could certainly have done without this in the summer of 2023 for sure.
And Caroline, how do you think this is affecting this person's fellow BBC presenters? I mean, Nicky Campbell spoke yesterday. He spoke about a really distressing weekend after false allegations. He says he's having conversations with police and lawyers at the moment about defamation and malicious communication that he's had over the weekend. This will be a very, very difficult time for them as well.
Terrible. I mean, this is what a lawyer referred to yesterday as collateral victims. I mean, on all sides of the story, I'm sure that's true, but the ones we're hearing from are those presenters at the BBC who felt moved at the weekend to step forward and say they were going on holiday, they hadn't been suspended, it was nothing to do with them. I mean, you can only imagine it becomes slightly Kafkaesque, doesn't it? When you have this very broad brush and names are deliberately withheld, of course, the brush lands on anybody that we don't much like. I had texts from people saying, oh, I hope it's so-and-so. I mean, this is a terrible state of affairs, and doing, again, the BBC as an umbrella brand, no favours at all. And obviously very challenging for people like Nicky Campbell to wake up on Saturday morning and to be fighting a fight that he was never in.
Yeah, but the young person is in this fight, the presenter's in this fight, and the parents of the young person are in this fight as well. And suddenly a lawyer, just like the Schofield case, has appeared on behalf of the young person. I just wonder how this plays out as a result of all of that. And people aren't stupid. They know who's funding the lawyer. They can take quite a good guess at this one as well. And I wonder how that will play out with the public.
We do know, don't we, that if the one thing we can set our watches to is the arrival of the lawyer or the lawyers in all of these situations. Certainly there seems to be, the story has slightly shifted, doesn't it, with this appearance of this lawyer. It seems now as though there's a slight disparity of story between even the two generations of this troubled family. And you do wonder just what's gone on in the last 3 days to make that the case. And of course, now we have the Sun, an explosive. I mean, we thought Saturday was explosive. This is another explosive headline to say that the BBC lied, that they made no effort to investigate, as they have claimed. I mean, by Sunday, the BBC seemed to be doing everything right. It was a PR challenge for sure, but they were investigating thoroughly and sensitively, all the key words that we expect in this era. And now the Sun have come forward with this, with the stepfather and mother saying that wasn't the case at all. So, I mean, these are battles at the heart. I mean, somebody's going to fall, aren't they? And I don't just mean the presenter. I mean, if somebody, either the Sun have got it horribly wrong, or the BBC have been horribly negligent. One of those things is true, and this is a very sad state of affairs.
Caroline Frost, thank you for your analysis. Really appreciate it. We'll leave it there. Thank you. Right, the time 12 minutes past 8.
The Prime Minister will today tell world leaders to increase their military budgets to deter Vladimir Putin at a major NATO summit in Lithuania.
Rishi Sunak will further back support for Ukraine with a recommendation that all members spend 2% of their GDP on defence, which is currently only done by 1 in 3 NATO leaders.
Well, we can cross now to our Deputy Political Editor, who's in Westminster for us this morning. Really good to see you this morning, Tom Harwood. I mean, let's start there, shall we, with Rishi Sunak's back to get other countries to further support Ukraine. That's quite remarkable, isn't it? Only 1 in 3 NATO leaders actually match that 2% spend of their GDP on defence.
They do, and this has been a long-term criticism of both the United Kingdom and the United States, two of those countries that have always met that 2% ambition. But one of the points of discussion today in Vilnius in Lithuania is to get that 2% ambition to be set as a legal minimum rather than something that is seen as more aspirational for many countries. Of course, over the last couple of years, we have seen some European countries in particular step up their defence spending in response to the illegal invasion of Ukraine, particularly Germany, a long-term laggard in defence spending, has agreed now to meet that commitment. So this is very much on the cards to move that 2% target from an ambition to a legal minimum, one of the key points of discussion in Vilnius over the next couple of days. However, I suppose the watchword of this conference, this annual NATO conference, is unity, trying to make sure that all of these disparate countries that span 2 continents will stay united, particularly on the issue of Ukraine and response to increasing threats, particularly from Russia. And on the eve of the conference, we learnt one big new piece of unifying news, I should say. President Erdogan of Turkey is now stepping back from his year-long opposition to Sweden joining NATO. Of course, both Sweden and Finland had applied to join NATO as a result of the invasion of Ukraine, feeling vulnerable to Russian aggression, and Finland was accepted several months ago. Sweden had been not allowed in, Turkey being the one member state that had been holding up that accession. Of course, you need unanimity of all NATO members to allow a new member to accede, but there seems to have been some backroom dealing. Turkey's worries about how Sweden was dealing with Kurdish separatists, they indeed were alleging that Sweden was harbouring who they view as Kurdish terrorists. Well, it seems there have been some security dealings, and indeed Sweden has now agreed to resume arms exports to Turkey, which means that ultimately we're seeing a more unified vision at this conference, and indeed potentially very soon a new NATO member.
Tom Harwood there from Westminster. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
And unemployment has risen to 4%, while wages increased at the joint highest rate on record. That's according to ONS data released about an hour ago. Average wages were 7.3% higher in the 3 months to May, raising fears that inflation will remain high.
The government's illegal migration bill returns to the House of Commons today after the draft legislation suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. MPs will vote on the changes today, which include new amendments to address safeguarding concerns for women and children.
More than 8 out of 10 of us are worried about supermarket shrinkflation. That's according to a new survey. Large majorities of shoppers are now turning away from their favourite brands as a result of smaller-sized items at original or higher prices.
It's been reported today what an ideal picnic should consist of, and they're talking about, well, it shouldn't have sausage rolls in it.
It should.
It shouldn't have fancy sausage rolls, I think. It should have sausage rolls, and it would be good. Greg, good morning. Greg, I do enjoy a prawn vol au vent when I picnic. Linda says, my ideal picnic would be a selection of sandwiches, crisps, selection of small pork pies and sausage rolls, cheese and crackers, and, of course, bottles of cold beer and pop for the kids. Yeah.
What's your essential in a picnic?
I like a nice piece of cake.
Okay.
You know, something like Victoria sponge or something like that would be nice.
Homemade or shop bought?
I don't mind.
Oh, not fussy.
I'm easily bought.
Okay.
I think the big danger is if you make it all too fancy, and the wasps get out. Wasps are hideous. Yeah. Wasps and flies. Dealing with them. Does that mean you should have your picnic under a net?
Oh, I think that all gets a bit too complicated.
But then you're fly-free.
You are fly-free. I sometimes think going for a picnic is a bit like going to a beach. I think it sounds a lot nicer in theory than the actual practicalities of making one. It's a lot of hard work making a picnic, and then you've got the ants and the wasps to contend with.
I find now at my age, being on your knees on the ground and getting back up again is difficult.
It's tough, yeah.
I think it's not easy, as you say.
It's not easy, no, it's not.
A nice chair. When I was at Royal Ascot a couple of weeks ago, I don't like deck chairs.
Oh, wow.
I find them very hard to get out of and into. And I always have this fear that they're going to snap and snap my fingers off or something
Don't
like
want that. No, carry on. Royal Ascot.
Maybe that's unduly worrying, but I do think they've accident written all over them. But when we were at Royal Ascot last week, there's a car park, and people do the most civilised things. They unload their car and they have folding up chairs and tables and things, and there they sit in the field, all very, very civilised. They don't go to a cafe or a restaurant within the race course.
They just do it in the car park?
They do it in the car park.
Wow, I never.
But of course, then you probably have to have like a Range Rover, which has a tailgate, which forms a table and things like that, you know.
Well, I didn't know that happened. That's quite...
It does happen.
Well,
the things you don't know, Miss Ellie.
The things I don't know. I'll have to come with you to Ascot next year, and we can look at all the picnics.
Yeah, well, nothing
I'd like to be involved
nothing like
in that.
making yourself invited where you're not, is there? Like just pushing in there.
I do like a picnic, and I do like Ascot.
Are you called Miss Ellie often?
No, you're the only one who calls me Miss Ellie.
Am I? Because you see, it's so much part of my life. Dallas.
Yeah, I didn't get the reference, but I like it.
Jock Ewing was married to Miss Ellie. Yeah.
I like it.
Well, she was an old doll, it has to be said. Anyway, but Miss Ellie, she was the matriarch of the Ewing family.
Oh, I'll take that then.
Yeah.
I'll be a matriarch. Thanks, Eamonn.
OK. Here's your Tuesday forecast if you're going out to have a picnic. Alex Deakin with that.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a damp start across the southeast. For most of us today, it's a mixture of some sunshine, but also plenty of showers. There's the rain that's moved in overnight, bringing a damp start across East Anglia and many southern counties of England. It is fizzling out, however, and then we are going to see showers developing pretty widely across the country. Now, for most, there's enough of a breeze to move those showers through, but they could still be heavy for a time. In northern Scotland, though, particularly in the northeast, the winds are quite light, which means the showers could turn into slow-moving thunderstorms that could cause some issues. In the sunny spells, temperatures just about climbing into the low 20s in most places, but feeling cooler with the breeze and when the showers come along, of which there will still be plenty around through this evening's rush hour. They do tend to fade across England and Wales overnight. There will be further rain crossing into parts of Scotland, however. And then on Wednesday, for many, it'll be a dry and a bright start. We'll also start with temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but some sunshine certainly likely over the Midlands and eastern England to begin with tomorrow morning. However, there'll be showers and quite a bit of cloud elsewhere, and then the showers just develop and become pretty widespread once more from late morning onwards. Perhaps not quite as intense as the downpours later today, but nevertheless still some pretty lively showers moving through on a brisk breeze for most of tomorrow. A little drier perhaps in the south, where temperatures again getting into the low 20s, for most high teens.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
What do you think of my backhand?
Very good.
Very good, yeah. Are you a tennis player? Do you serve like that? Or do you serve, or do you do the overhand?
I do this one.
You do that one.
That's more like table tennis, isn't it? I can do that one. But do stay with us, because we're going to have all of the latest from Wimbledon and all that tennis action with Paul Coit as Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic make it through to the quarterfinals.
It's creeping up to 8:30. At 7 o'clock this morning, the latest Office of National Statistics data shows that wages have increased at the joint highest rate on record. And all of this, of course, makes people worry that inflation will remain high.
Yes, the new figures also show that unemployment has risen to 4%. Well, Jonathan Ashworth is the Shadow Secretary for Work and Pensions, and he joins us now from Westminster. Really good to see you this morning. And you're here this morning to talk to us about getting more people into work, which is really relevant with those statistics that we've just shared. Unemployment has risen, jumped up to 4%. How would Labour get more people into work? And more importantly, how would they pay them more as well? Because pay continues to be squeezed in real terms as well. When adjusting for inflation, it's down 1.2%. It's not a good picture, is it?
No, that's absolutely right. So unemployment creeping up, wages squeezed again, I think for the 19th month in a row now, I think it is. People are really struggling, and I'm absolutely determined to help more people into good, well-paid jobs. So I'm putting forward significant reforms today as to how a Labour government would reform welfare, would reform our job centres, using AI and modern technology in our job centres to help people find jobs sooner. At the moment, the job centres get around 60% of unemployed people into new jobs within 9 months. But if you use modern technology, if you use AI to help people find job vacancies which are more suitable for their skills, I believe you can help get people into jobs much quicker than that. And it's really important, because if you get more people into jobs, you'll grow your economy, you'll make your economy more productive, and we'll all be better off as a result. So we've got a big ambition, a big mission to get people into good paid jobs.
That's really good to hear, Jonathan, because Ellie and I, and it's no different when Isabel sits here with me, and I think we're all a bit worried about AI. We jump back and we think, oh, well, is it going to be the tail wagging the dog and all that sort of thing? But here you actually see, in a practical way, whereby AI can identify quicker, appropriate jobs for people at the job centres, in the job markets.
Yeah, there are opportunities with AI that I want to embrace, because I'm both a welfare reformer and a public service reformer. Now, of course, AI is also changing the labour market. That's absolutely right. As modern technologies always change the types of jobs in the labour market, but it should make us all more productive. It should open up new avenues and new opportunities, but we should use these tools to improve public services. And that's why I'm suggesting let's use them in the job centre. Let me just give you a quick example. I was talking to an organisation. They were trying to get young people into hospitality jobs. They rang up the job centre and said, look, we've got some jobs. Give us a list of young unemployed people in the area who've said they want to work in bar work and hospitality. And the job centre said to them, we can't give you that list, not because of data protection, but because they can't produce that list. That's crazy, when there are people who want work, that the job centres are not making the best use of these modern technologies. I want to change that.
And you know what? You talk about the hospitality industry. I know so many people working in it, who work in it, who look to hire people in it as well. And I look at myself, in my first job, for 6 years or 7 years, was working in a bar, and it's so transformative. You think, how can one job help you in another? I learned how to talk to people, standing behind a bar, pulling pints, and and you develop social skills. And so it's really good to hear that you can get somebody into one field. It doesn't mean to say they'll stay in that field, but it can help them in other fields. Work leads to work, I believe.
I mean, absolutely. Let me tell you a story. You might not know this about me. My mum and dad, they worked in hospitality. My dad worked in the casinos of Manchester, actually worked in the Playboy casino in the 70s, where he met my mum, who was a Playboy bunny girl waitress in that casino. And this was 1970s Manchester, with some very famous Man United footballers at the time, which I know you'll be fans of. I used to go in that casino and would be served by my mum and dad. So, look, though they were working class people from Salford, the opportunity of those types of jobs, it gave them a sense of pride, a sense of self-belief, and it meant the world to them, because it meant they could build a home and build a family.
Jonathan Ashworth, what a story this morning. We weren't expecting that.
Have you any pictures?
That was amazing. Yeah. Right, we want to ask you, just before we let you go...
I've got some pictures.
Oh, he has got pictures. Great. Well, we'll have a look at those later. Whilst we've got you, I do want to ask about one of the biggest stories going on today, as it has been for the past 5 days. And, of course, that is the BBC presenter scandal at the moment. Front page of the Daily Mail this morning, 1 in 6 people know who the scandal hit BBC star is. We've also heard from the BBC star Nicky Campbell speaking over the weekend about what a distressing weekend it's been for him over these false allegations. He's having discussions with the police regarding malicious communication and lawyers about defamation. So it does call into question, doesn't it, our privacy laws? If 1 in 6 people know who this person is, but the media cannot print the name, are our media laws up to scratch? Are they with the times? And are we doing enough to protect people who are innocent?
Well, look, I mean, I don't know that many people know. I mean, I don't know who it is. I know there's all kinds of stuff swirls around on social media, but then there's lots of people coming out saying it's not them on social media because they've been accused of awful stuff over the weekend. So I don't know. But look, it's obviously a very difficult, serious, sensitive story. Obviously questions as to how the BBC has reacted when these allegations were put to them. Obviously in the last 24 hours, last night, there's some dispute as well now about this story as well. So it's becoming more complicated. Clearly there's got to be a thorough investigation which gets to the bottom of all these very serious questions, and the BBC need to carry out that investigation and need to get on with it. Look, everyone is speculating, everyone's being asked for their opinion. In a funny sort of way, I know I'm a politician, but I'm not sure it actually helps for politicians to be offering a kind of running commentary when none of us know the facts of all this. We're getting different versions of events reported. The BBC really need to do a proper investigation and answer all these questions.
Well, it'll be a developing story today, Jonathan. There'll be a lot of questions to be answered as the annual report from the BBC is due today as well. We'll say goodbye to you, my friend. Thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Ashworth, they're talking about embracing AI to reform welfare services and get more people into work. And we were saying earlier about all the things to fear about AI.
Yeah.
And this could be something that's, very positive.
You're right, and it's nice, isn't it? It's a relief to hear a positive about AI, because it is such a worry. And what an amazing story about his parents as well. Mum being a Playboy bunny. It's just wonderful. You never know what's going to happen on this show. It's brilliant, isn't it? Let us know what you make of that or any of the stories that we're talking about today. gbviews@gbnews.com.
The back pages shape up like this on this... what day is it? Tuesday? Tuesday morning. Al Farmore, thunderbolts at the Aussies. The Mail leads with fighting talk from fast bowler Mark Wood. Here's the Mirror. You beauty, as Wimbledon's new sensation Chris Eubanks makes his way into the quarter-final. Who's Chris Eubanks? Like as in the boxer?
No, there's an S added. So that was Chris Eubank. This is Chris Eubanks.
Never heard of him.
Just an SOA, you will.
Yeah.
I asked the same question earlier.
Yeah.
I'm living the dream right now. The Guardian also highlights Eubanks. Though you never heard of him, 2 stories at once there. He's American, apparently, and apparently he's got the world at his feet. Yeah. There we go. So who is he?
I'll tell you about it. He's 6'7".
Yeah,
6'7".
With that.
American tennis player. Terrible on grass up until now. He played in the Surbiton competition and was disastrous. And the quote that he said that grass is the stupidest surface to play tennis on. And he got in contact with Kim Clijsters, legendary Belgian tennis player, a multiple Wimbledon champion. And she said the way to play on grass, Ellie, as you know, is more footwork drills. So he's done footwork drills, he's been running around the court, he's turned his game around, he's come to Wimbledon, so not expecting too much. And then he beat Cameron Norrie, and then he played yesterday as well. He wins again, and this is beating Stefanos Tsitsipas, who beat Andy Murray. And now it seems like he's got Wimbledon eaten out of his hand. He's doing the right thing, because the thing is, if you're a tennis player, all you've got to do is smile, wave, say something relatively funny towards the crowd, and all of a sudden they love you, because so many players take it so seriously. So he's having a bit of fun with it, everybody loves him, and now he's the new crowd favourite.
But he must be formidable at 6'7", the height, the power
that's
that he
right.
can get in his serves.
That's exactly right. I mean, you say you don't know him, but you have described exactly what his game is. 6'7", the ball coming down from a huge height. So imagine with the arm and the racket on top of that, that makes it over 100 feet in the air. That ball's coming down from at 130 miles an hour.
Right at you.
There's his game, and he's doing very, very well, and everybody loves him. He's a great personality. So we wish him well.
So let's go from a crowd favourite then to somebody who might not be quite as popular, because there's been some drama, hasn't there, with a young Russian player?
Yes, Mira Andreeva. So she's only 16 and she's a terrific player, and obviously we know about the problems that we're having with Russian and Belarusian players and how the crowd are reacting to that. Well, they've been quite generous to her, but she played yesterday and she's a bit of a racket thrower, a bit of a temper tantrum. So it's got to match point, or actually it was, I think it was just before match point. She slips over, fit of peak. It's the second time she did it, gets her racket, and, you know, we're racket abuse, etc., and you can lose a point. So she slams her racket into the ground, very upset, and then the umpire says, right, a point deducted because, you know, for abuse to the racket. And so she then comes up with the excuse, the fact that she'd slipped over, and she didn't actually. It's like, no, I never did it. I didn't do it. I was just falling over. She did. She slammed it into the ground, match point against her, lost the match, and then she refused to shake hands, which is interesting considering there's lots of Russians that aren't being shaken hands with.
Anyway.
She didn't shake hands exactly with the umpire.
Right, so we know that David De Gea is out of Manchester United after 12 years. Legendary goalkeeper. Now, United are looking at the inter-goalkeeper, Andre Onana.
Yes.
Tell me about him.
Well, he played at Ajax, very successful at Ajax, with Erik ten Hag, so knows him very well. So he was at Inter, and now Inter Milan are looking for 2 new goalkeepers, which pretty much says that Onana's going to be going. We know what's happened to David De Gea. Did you see the tweet, by the way, from Marcus Rashford? Marcus Rashford put a tweet out about David De Gea, and this is probably a good piece of advice to anybody that has... So there it is. There it is. It looks like a very nice tweet. But what it actually says at the top is, caption ideas... ... and then it says, you were here for my breakthrough. Good luck with your next step, brother. I don't think it means next step, brother. It means next step, brother. So it says caption ideas at the front. So obviously, whoever looks after his Twitter account has sent it to him and said, there you go, how about this one? Oh, I quite like that.
Choose A, B or C.
They left caption ideas at the top. So it's obviously not quite from the heart.
So you reckon this guy, Onana's good?
Yes, he is. Very good goalkeeper.
I thought Ashley Young was retired, but he's on a move to Burnley, possibly.
38. He's 38 years old, still plays on. Yeah, so he's left Aston Villa. And we're thinking now, surely there's going to be a point where you're going to retire, but no. Everton are now going to take him on, so it looks like he's off to Everton now.
Very good.
So,
quick look at the Chelsea shirt. Let's just see the Chelsea shirt. This is
Chelsea shirt, a new Chelsea shirt. See what we think of this. Ellie, I know football fashion is a big thing with you. There we are. There's some players there of today and yesteryear as well. You see Dennis Wise.
It's very minimalist, isn't it?
It is very minimalist. Well, we were saying earlier that there's no advertising on the front because they've still got to work that out.
Well, there's not yet. They'll
don't.
Yeah, they'll take that out.
There we are, some classic Admiral shirts. And the other one of our favourite shirts that we've chosen over the years. How about that? Terry Yorath there. Gabby Logan's dad, Terry.
But that's brown.
The chocolate Coventry shirt of the 70s.
Ghastly.
Looks like a Kit Kat.
At that.
And the slimming lines on it as well.
It does. Makes you look
Paul,
good.
thank you very much indeed, my friend. We're going to be back with the newspapers right after this. Don't go away.
Welcome back. The time is 8:43.
Oh, the conversations we have during the break.
You did not want to come back early from that one, yeah?
No.
Well, joining us to go through the papers in more detail this morning is TV personality Nicola McLean and journalist and former Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubney.
So
really good to
here
see
we
you both.
have, Nicola, the most of the papers, but the Mail front page, and they're saying 1 in 6 people know who the scandal hit BBC star, I don't like this word star.
No, exactly.
Star, Cilla Black's a star, Morecambe and Wise are stars, they're not stars. This presenter is. 1 in 6 people already know. So the question you're asking is, what are we waiting for?
Yeah, what are we waiting for? And, you know, I think it's more than 1 in 6 people know. So I put up on my Instagram today that I was here and the first story I'd be talking about was the BBC presenter. And the amount of people in my DMs, alluding to who it is quite obviously. Everybody knows. I don't know why the papers aren't naming him. I don't know why, you know, we protect these people so much. I don't know why big organisations protect people like this, you know. It's baffling to me.
Well, it's an interesting variant on copyright and legality and what you're allowed to publish. So the internet, of course, is the Wild West.
Yeah.
And you can just Google, you know, BBC presenter images and it's just there. And like, I was out with my football team last night. There's like plasterers, labourers, they all know.
Yeah.
They've all got the pictures. It's like absolutely commonplace. So there's this absurdity of the mainstream press, the print press, and you know, ourselves who are governed by Ofcom and can't go there, obviously. But the internet is the Wild West. The next big event, I think, is today. The BBC is forecasted to be publishing the annual list of top 10 paid presenters. This individual's name is certain to be on that list. And so then I think the conversation will roll to, if this individual has paid £35,000 for explicit images, and if this person is earning a hell of a lot of money from the licence fee, effectively that's what you and I pay. We're paying this individual who's spending that money on nefarious reasons.
What he spends his money on is up to him.
Yeah.
Surely.
If it's legal... But if it's illegal, or in terms of was this individual under 18, it's illegal to share naked images, that's child porn. I'm afraid that's the law. It's different to the age of consent. And if that was public money, effectively, I think people will have a right to be angry.
Well, we have, Martin, the story's twisted so much today where you have the young person involved is saying, what my parents are saying about this is complete nonsense. And a lawyer has popped up representing this young person. Now, obviously, the young person's not paying for that lawyer themselves, but it may be, you know, Nicola was saying, what are we waiting for? Maybe we're waiting for making sure that the story is true and fair and accurate.
Yeah, and obviously we here have these two very contrasting viewpoints of the parent and the foster parent, and then the next thing in terms of legality, who owns the images? If the images were created by a young person shared with the presenter, they're not actually the copyright or the data of the parents. So then we have this whole complicated issue of were they allowed to pass them on to a newspaper? How do they get out there? And so then the law steps in terms of data protection. So for the time being, at least, with the confusion and the legal situation, the presenter will remain anonymous.
Yeah. We were sitting talking, there's so many complications about this that we can't really talk about, but things that we are aware of and what if and what might. Be that as it may, if and when the name of the presenter becomes public, and I'm not saying they've broken the law or anything else, but do you think the public's attitude to that person means or would mean that this would be career ending for that person?
Yes, I think it would be. I think that people will be, the people that don't already know will be really shocked as to who it is. And, you know, that person is married and has got a family. And I think that his family need to be thought of in this as well, because this must be horrendous for them. But I think that's him finished now, surely.
Many echoes of the Schofield case in that particular parallel, of course. Now, there's this kind of double life going on. When that's exposed, I think the story is going to really kind of explode.
Yeah, well, it is going to continue to roll on, isn't it? Especially with today, that big day at the BBC, when the annual report comes out a little bit later.
Yeah.
Martin, let's have a look at one of your stories now. I'm not sure about this one. Give us a calorie count along with our pint.
Yeah, so there's a YouGov poll of 12,000 come out, maintaining they say that 51% of people want to know how many calories are in their alcohol. So at the moment, soft drinks and food are legally mandated. They have to put calorie counts, fat content, sugars on labelling, and now they want to move it towards booze. Now, I don't know about you, but if you walked into a pub and there's like a Guinness pump or a lager pump with a calorie count on it, that would be a complete buzzkill.
It ruins it.
I don't want to do that. And I think what they're doing, actually, is they're nudging us towards accepting more control. The World Health Organization want us to drink less. They want us to have less fun. They want us just to exist. And by labelling, you could say is helpful. Like, people like how many units are in it, because that's useful for driving or for health. But the calories, I think, is just a step too far. They're trying to squeeze the enjoyment out of everything.
Yeah.
I know a guy who's constantly moaning about his weight. Oh, I can't lose my weight, I can't lose my weight. And every time I see him, especially at the weekend, he's on a binge with his mates, and it's stout.
Is that me?
It's always stout in his hand. And I say to him, you know, this is putting the beef on you. You must know this. And they seem to be oblivious to the fact that you would relate drink to weight.
Yeah, because you weigh it out. You weigh it out. That's what I live by. So, you know, the food, you know, it's different to the Prosecco or the wine. You weigh it out.
Are you saying that's your belief?
My utter belief.
Your utter belief.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, is it? They're
standing by it. I'm standing by it.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about the actual calories is there's 206 calories in a pint, but 226 in a 250ml glass of wine. So actually, there's more calories in what you're drinking than in a pint.
Not in a Prosecco, though. 90 calories per glass. It's less than a banana. Choose your calories wisely, guys.
You know your science on this. And Martin, would stout be more calorific than lager or beer?
Yes, particularly like a sweet stout, like a Mackeson's. You know, there's malty or sweeter stouts because they have a higher sugar content. Less of the sugar is brewed into alcohol. But people are, I think, making lower calorie choices like light beers. But I think this is nanny state gone mad. Let us have a drink and forget about all this nonsense.
Well, look, I don't even like calories on menus.
Neither
it makes
do
me
I.
change my choice.
But I mean, I sort of don't need to be told it because I'm not stupid. I know what's going to be calorific. Maybe I need reminding. Maybe I need to say, look, if you have that steak, that's better than having that lasagna or whatever. Maybe I need that. I don't know. But Nicola, when a push comes to shove, at the end of the day, there's always a fat jab to be had. There's stories in The Sun. What are they saying about fat jabs?
So they're now saying there's going to be an investigation that they over reports that it can make you suicidal. Now, there's only been 3 cases of that being a side effect in Iceland, which obviously is not many compared to how many people are using it, but any case of a suicide obviously needs to be investigated. But I find this weight loss jab is so bad, and especially for young people on social media. I mean, this is being sort of hailed as like, you know, as you say, eat what you want, drink what you want, and then just get this skinny jab. And it's so easy to get. It's so easy. I was actually giving it on social media for free.
Is this the
it's for diabetes, So for type 2 diabetes, but then it suppresses your appetite so you don't eat. So you have to be a certain weight to get it, but you don't, because it's all done online, and you can put in your weight to whatever you want to make the nurse say that you can have it. As I say, I was giving it for free over social media, and I actually did use this jab for a period of time.
Any side effects?
Yeah, I was really unwell, really sick,
Nauseous?
bad headache, and I really, I think that, you know, they're saying that Kim Kardashian has it, obviously allegedly. I don't know if she does, but then we look at her and she looks great, and you think, oh my God, I want to look like that. I'll just do this jab. And it's not the case. I mean, people like that are working out. I'm not saying that they don't do other things, but I think it's really worrying how easy it is to get, and especially if it's going to, as, you know, even 3 cases of a side effect being suicide. I think we need to...
It worries me that a beautiful woman like you worries about the way she looks when you just look lovely.
Well, take that. Thank you very much. That's really nice. Thank
But there is a worry, isn't there, with it being so unregulated in this country? I mean, loads of my friends are really slim, pretty girls, and they're buying it online.
I know.
And it's got these side effects that so many people wouldn't know about. That's why it's so important that you're talking about it.
I was so ill. It was my husband at the end, in the end, that threw it out, because I'd convinced myself it wasn't that was making me ill. I was like, oh, I'm just not well. And he was like, no, you've been ill since you started jabbing yourself in the stomach. come up with something that you don't need.
Mark, look, listen, there's so much to talk about, and here we are now. We're all thinking what to go and have for breakfast now, after that. Martin, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And Nicola, lovely seeing you. Come back and see us soon.
Definitely.
Thank you very much indeed. Oh, incidentally, we're talking about picnics, and we're going to get views from people at home. What's the essential in your picnic basket? What do you think you couldn't do without as regards the food?
Sausage roll.
Sausage roll, agree with you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say sausage roll, and I also take a little bit of pickle.
Oh,
Got to be a bit
nice.
of Branston pickle.
Oh, yeah. I think we're all agreed on that one. We all like a sausage roll.
No disagreements with that. Let's see what agreement we're going to get in the forecast from Alex Deacon.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Morning, I'm Alex Deacon. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a damp start across the southeast. For most of us today, it's a mixture of some sunshine, but also plenty of showers. There's the rain that's moved in overnight, bringing a damp start across East Anglia and many southern counties of England. It is fizzling out, however, and then we are going to see showers developing pretty widely across the country. Now, for most, there's enough of a breeze to move those showers through, but they could still be heavy for a time. In northern Scotland, though, particularly in the northeast, the winds are quite light, which means the showers could turn into slow-moving thunderstorms that could cause some issues. In the sunny spells, temperatures just about climbing into the low 20s in most places, but feeling cooler with the breeze and when the showers come along, of which there will still be plenty around through this evening's rush hour. They do tend to fade across England and Wales overnight. There will be further rain crossing into parts of Scotland, however. And then on Wednesday, for many, it'll be a dry and a bright start. We'll also start with temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but some sunshine certainly likely over the Midlands and eastern England to begin with tomorrow morning. However, there'll be showers and quite a bit of cloud elsewhere, and then the showers just develop and become pretty widespread once more from late morning onwards. Perhaps not quite as intense as the downpours later today, but nevertheless still some pretty lively showers moving through on a brisk breeze for most of tomorrow. A little drier perhaps in the south, where temperatures again getting into the low 20s, for most high teens.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Now stay with us. We'll bring you all the latest on the BBC presenter scandal as the young person at the centre of the story calls the claims rubbish. A new twist in the BBC presenter scandal as the alleged victim calls the claims rubbish.
Hello there, very good to see you. 9 o'clock on this Tuesday, the 11th of July. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Ellie.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The mother of the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal say they stand by their claims after a lawyer representing the youth said nothing inappropriate or unlawful took place. Our home editor, Mark White, will bring us the latest.
Well, the BBC's Director General is preparing to launch the corporation's annual report today, normally dominated by questions of the likes of presenters' salaries. But all anyone really wants to talk about at the moment is this latest scandal to engulf the corporation.
Rishi Sunak will tell NATO leaders in Lithuania today to increase spending to deter Russian tyranny as he urges them to meet their defence targets.
The government has been forced to U-turn on key parts of the illegal migration bill after it suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. The changes include limits on detention periods for children and pregnant women.
And what's the picture going to be like for the rest of July? We'll bring you your latest forecast.
There's been quite a bit of heavy rain overnight and there'll be more downpours through the day today. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
So here's the latest development in our top story this morning, because a lawyer representing the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal has said claims that they were paid tens of thousands of pounds for explicit pictures are rubbish.
Well, in response, the parents said they stand by their claims and accused the corporation of ignoring testimony that was given to them back in May.
Now, earlier we spoke to Labour's Jonathan Ashworth, who said the BBC needs to get on with this investigation.
It's obviously a very difficult, serious, sensitive story. Obviously questions as to how the BBC has reacted when these allegations were put to them. Obviously in the last 24 hours, last night, there's some dispute as well now about this story as well. So it's becoming more complicated. Clearly there's got to be a thorough investigation which gets to the bottom of all these very serious questions, and the BBC need to carry out that investigation and need to get on with it.
I think there are going to be lots of more very serious questions as the BBC publishes its annual report today. Mark White is there at Broadcasting House to tell us more. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Eamonn. This is a very complicated case. It seems to get complicated, more complicated with every passing day. And of course, it took a very significant twist yesterday with this young person through their lawyers, West End lawyers, issuing this statement to say that they believe that the story that was published by The Sun originally last Friday was rubbish in the allegations that The Sun newspaper was making, and also saying that this young person had contacted The Sun prior to this story being published to say that the allegations were wrong. But of course that, as far as we could see, never featured in the coverage by the newspaper on the Friday when this story went to press. The Sun, of course, have published another splash for the 5th day running today to say they absolutely stand by their story and the allegations that were made by the mother and stepfather of this person. It's clear from what we're being told that it seems to be an estranged family here, and there is one version that is coming through now from the mother and stepfather, another version coming through from this person at the centre of the allegations. That only adds to the complexity of this case, and all the while, of course, the BBC grappling with what they do when they, of course, have to manage a member of their staff, and also the competing demands that they investigate thoroughly these allegations that have been made here.
Right, are we going to Lithuania? We are. Sorry, Mark, I was going to ask you a question, but we have to go to Lithuania instead. Vilnius, the NATO General Secretary. There you see Jens Stoltenberg there, and he's just began a speech. Let's have a listen in.
And the other countries in this region. At the summit, we'll also make important decisions, sending a clear message to Ukraine that we stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes, and expect allies also to reiterate their commitment to provide military support to Ukraine to help them liberate more land. On the membership issue, I also expect that allies will send a clear and positive message on the path forward towards membership for Ukraine. I have proposed a package of 3 elements with more practical support with a multi-year program to ensure full interoperability between the Ukrainian forces and the NATO forces. This will move Ukraine closer to NATO. To strengthen the political ties with the establishment of the NATO-Ukraine Council. We will have the inaugural meeting tomorrow with President Zelensky. And then to remove the requirement for membership action plan. This will turn the membership process for Ukraine from a 2-step process into a 1-step process. So all of this will send a positive and strong message. Then allies will also make important decisions to further strengthen our deterrence and defense, with new defense plans and more forces on high readiness. We also agree that I also expect that allies will agree a more ambitious defense investment pledge, where 2% of GDP for defense will be a minimum. And then lastly, I look forward to also welcoming our Indo-Pacific partners at this summit. This will demonstrate that security is not regional, security is global, and therefore I welcome the partners from Australia, New Zealand, South Korea and Japan. And with that, I'm ready to take some questions.
Steve Sedgwick, CNBC.
The General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg there. We'll break off to get analysis here in the studio. Catherine Foster, our political reporter on this one. And the aim, and you wonder, these levies are set, 2% of gross national product is supposed to be contributed towards a NATO force amongst member countries. We're paying it, but not everybody else is.
No, and this is something that Donald Trump used to talk about very loudly. Only 7 of 30 NATO members are. The US, us, Greece, Poland, the Baltic states. But to give you an example, Germany's only paying 1.5%, Italy's only paying 1.5%. So the thinking is now to make this binding, that this is not optional.
Yes.
And countries like Germany that really haven't spent much on their defence obviously have upped their spending in the last year or so since the invasion.
And the Ukraine war would be a wake-up call in all of this, presumably.
Absolutely, because, I mean, it's not long, is it, since Emmanuel Macron said that NATO was brain dead. That was like 2019. And now we have really seen NATO coming into its own with this united response to the invasion of Ukraine. And they've got off to a good start, haven't they, with the announcement last night that Sweden's path to joining is now clear because President Erdogan of Turkey has dropped his opposition. And the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be appearing at some stage at the summit. And we do expect this promise of Israel-style financial support going forwards from the UK, the US, Germany and France to send a positive message that the money will be there, the support will be there for Ukraine until this war is over.
Yeah, and of course they're going to be very pleased, I'm sure, with that level of protection. But of course the membership issue is still very much there, and we just heard Stoltenberg talk about that, talking about removing that action plan. So instead of having a 2-step plan, it's now just going to be 1. So it's part of streamlining this process for after the fighting ends for Ukraine to become a part of NATO officially as a member.
Yes, and this is something that Zelensky has long been pushing for. And of course, while the war is going on, that's not going to happen, is it? Because it would bring us all into direct conflict. But a path when the war is over to streamline so Zelensky can feel, well, when this ends, we will be able to join NATO, and that will give us protection going forward. So all about really messaging to Russia that the West is united.
We know that some members, though, of NATO have been worried about that, because if there is this promise of when the fighting ends, you can join NATO, well, Putin doesn't want a NATO neighbour. That's one of the reasons why, but the main reason why he chose to invade. They worry then that that just gives Russia that incentive to keep that fight carrying on and to escalate things potentially.
Well, yes, and I mean, none of this is easy, and Russia, you know, Ukraine is a month into the counter-offensive now. The US can't supply weapons fast enough, apparently, and that's why the US are now going to release these really rather horrible cluster bombs that are banned by over 100 countries. But this war shows no sign of ending, and of course what we don't know also is what really is happening within Russia and just how secure, you know, Vladimir Putin's position is.
So this is a two-day conference, is it?
Two-day conference.
Two-day, right.
Yeah.
You keep us posted. Thanks for the moment, very much indeed. Catherine Foster there. With the time at 11 minutes past 9, we'll bring you up to date with the rest of today's news stories.
And mortgage costs have reached the highest level for 15 years, with 2-year fixed-rate deals surpassing the peak that followed Liz Truss's mini-budget. Mortgage lenders will be questioned by MPs later today about those rising rates.
Government's illegal migration bill returns to the House of Commons later today after the draft legislation suffered 20 defeats in the Lords. MPs are to vote on the changes made by the upper chamber, which include new amendments to address safeguarding concerns for women and children.
Players and fans are gearing up for the quarter-finals at Wimbledon today. 7-time champion Novak Djokovic will take on Russian 7th seed Andrei Rublev in the last 8.
We're fast approaching 9:30, time for Britain's newsroom with Andrew and Bev. They've popped into the studio to give us a preview of what they're getting their teeth into. Guys, good morning to you.
Morning. Good morning.
What have you got?
Well, the BBC story that won't go away that is much more complicated than when we spoke to you yesterday, because as we know, the young person involved, through lawyers, expensive lawyers, must be said, I don't know who's paid for them, has completely repudiated the Sun's version of events, says no law was broken, no inappropriate behaviour. The family of this young person has doubled down and said, we told the BBC, we talked to them for an hour and they never came back to us. So I think now the chances of the BBC presenter being named are vanishingly thin. Because there was talk at Westminster that an MP under the cloak of parliamentary privilege, been able to do that for 500-600 years, would name the person. But I think that's now less likely.
But a big day for the BBC, because they've got that annual report coming out.
Bad timing for Tim Davie, the Director General, isn't it?
Yeah,
because the press will be there.
So we think Tim Davie should be speaking this morning, I think, during our show. So that will be quite interesting to see what the journalists who are there ask him about.
It's because they'll ask better questions than MPs.
The usual things that he would be talking about, presenters' salaries and things like that, sort of cast into the shade, really.
Yeah.
On a day like today. What else are we talking about? We're going to be also discussing this NATO Leaders Summit. We're going to be talking to a couple of experts about what that might mean for all of us.
And hotels and migrants.
Hotels.
What a story.
Hotel rooms being held for migrants at eye-watering cost to the taxpayer, and why we're still doing that. Of course, yesterday there was this awful stabbing of a teacher in Gloucestershire, so we're going to have one of our reporters down there this morning to see if we know any more about that.
Sleepy little Tewkesbury, lovely little market town you'd never have thought.
Have you thought about what you'd put in your picnic baskets? This is a story in the news today.
Booze.
What?
Booze. Rosé. Rosé, ideally.
There's me thinking a little slice of Battenberg or something like that.
Well, I'm a big fan of Battenberg. It's gone out of fashion because we're not supposed to eat marzipan, but I love Battenberg. I would definitely have a bottle of gin in there with some tonic and some prawns, I think.
Yeah.
You know how to live. You know how to live. Thank you very much.
Style.
Those are ideas. Keep your ideas coming in to us. Britain's newsroom with Andrew and Bev at 9:30.
Next, we're going to be asking the Pension Secretary about the government's new proposals, which could see your pension boosted by up to £1,000 a year. That's next.
The latest Office of National Statistics data has revealed that wages have increased at the joint highest rate on record, raising fears that inflation will remain high.
Well, the new figures also show that unemployment has risen to 4%. Well, we're joined now by Mel Stride, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, who's at Westminster for us now. Good morning to you, Mel Stride. Really good to see you. Work and pensions, this is your bread and butter. I wonder what you make of the unemployment figures out this morning. Jobless rate jumped to 4%. Wages are up, but of course, because of inflation, they are squeezed. We're all getting poorer, down 1.2%. It's a bleak picture, isn't it?
Well, on unemployment, you're right, it's niched up a little bit. It is still down at historically very low levels. And of course, the other really important data we got this morning on employment is that we've had a reduction since its peak in the pandemic of economic inactivity of 360,000. So that's 360,000 more people in the workforce because of what we're doing to get economic inactivity down. As to the point about wage pressures, etc., you're absolutely right that there is a continued concern, of course, around inflation. Inflation is beginning to come down, and we are absolutely determined that by the end of the year we will see inflation at half the rate that it was at the beginning. And it's imperative that we do that because, of course, it impoverishes us all, particularly the most vulnerable and the poorest in society. And what I've been doing in my department, actually, is a huge amount of work in getting out direct financial support to just those people. So 8 million low-income households getting £900 this year into their bank accounts, 6 million disabled people getting £150 that's already gone into their bank accounts, and in December £300 to pensioners alongside their winter fuel payments. So that and a number of other measures are really important targeted things that we can do to relieve the kind of pressures that you've quite rightly pointed to.
All of that sounded very good news. Mr. Stride, didn't pick up how you were going to boost those figures. It all sounds very, very good, but basically, how will that be paid for?
So, well, that's all factored into the Office of Budget Responsibilities numbers. So they basically drive the forecasts of inflation and where that's heading. So they're all costed in that sense, as economists would term it. But look, the most important thing we can do now is get inflation down. And there are a number of components to that. The first one is we've got to support the Bank of England with its difficult task of using monetary policy and interest rates to bear down on inflation. We've got to have a fiscal policy as a government that supports that. So that means, for example, not having excessive public sector pay settlements. We've got to resist that, or we will have continued inflationary pressure. And thirdly, we've got to do things like get economic inactivity down, which I've just talked about, the 360,000 reduction, to increase the labour supply, to also bear down on inflation. And if we can start to do that, a lot of these pressures that people are feeling will begin to ease. But I accept, of course, that these are very difficult times.
I wanted to ask you about our top story today, indeed the biggest story of the last 5 days, is this BBC presenter scandal. Daily Mail says 1 in 5 people, according to their poll, already know who that BBC presenter is by name. Nicky Campbell, the BBC presenter, has been speaking out yesterday about what was a distressing weekend. He has been falsely accused over the weekend. He says he's having conversations with the police about malicious communication and lawyers about defamation. So there are innocent people in this getting hurt. Would you reveal the name of the BBC presenter under parliamentary privilege?
No, I wouldn't, is the short answer to that. I think the biggest takeaway from this set of circumstances at the moment, or one of the big ones, is that we just don't know the facts. In fact, we're getting now contradictory facts from statements from various individuals that may or may not be involved within this. And I think under those circumstances, the sensible thing to do is to let this run its course, let the BBC investigate. The police are also investigating, of course, and see where it lands, and then start to make the kind of judgments that people seem to be rushing to at the moment. I do also think that it's very irresponsible and very ill-advised for people to be out there on on Twitter, basically speculating as to who various individuals may be. I think that is also very wrong.
Okay. Thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. That's Mel Stride. He's the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Appreciate it. Thank you. We'll say goodbye to you. We've reached that stage of the day where we conclude and posher picnickers leave out sausage rolls. So in the picnic season, people are leaving out sausage rolls, which we wouldn't do. I would leave out fancy sausage rolls, bits added to them, not in favour of that. And what's your essential?
I'd have a scone.
Yes.
Scone.
Cream jam.
Cream and jam, of
all
course.
That sort
and
of thing.
Preferably homemade, but if I'm lazy...
I'd have a net or a hat with a net on it to stop the wasps and flies.
And a Victoria sponge.
And a Victoria sponge, or maybe Battenberg.
Yeah, and a bottle of Prosecco as well.
But it all sounds nice. We just need the weather to go with it all. We will be back, whatever you're doing today. Have a good day. Enjoy yourselves. Back from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Well, we won't be back. Isabel will be back tomorrow. Yeah, but it was lovely having you.
Yeah, it was lovely to see you.
Yes,
So
thank
good.
you very much
Thanks for
indeed.
having me.
But up next, Britain's newsroom. Here's Andrew and Bev.
Thank you, guys.
Big day, BBC. The boss of the BBC is talking about presenters' pay, but guess the only question he's going to be asked? All about the presenter and the young person.
It is. It's complicated, but we're going to be tackling all of the details. Don't go anywhere.
And a big scandal about migrants and hotels. Don't go away.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a damp start across the southeast. For most of us today, it's a mixture of some sunshine, but also plenty of showers. There's the rain that's moved in overnight, bringing a damp start across East Anglia and many southern counties of England. It is fizzling out, however, and then we are going to see showers developing pretty widely across the country. Now, for most, there's enough of a breeze to move those showers through, but they could still be heavy for a time. In northern Scotland, though, particularly in the northeast, the winds are quite light, which means the showers could turn into slow-moving thunderstorms that could cause some issues. In the sunny spells, temperatures just about climbing into the low 20s in most places, but feeling cooler with the breeze and when the showers come along, of which there will still be plenty around through this evening's rush hour. They do tend to fade across England and Wales overnight. There will be further rain crossing into parts of Scotland, however. And then on Wednesday, for many, it'll be a dry and a bright start. We'll also start with temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but some sunshine certainly likely over the Midlands and eastern England to begin with tomorrow morning. However, there'll be showers and quite a bit of cloud elsewhere, and then the showers just develop and become pretty widespread once more from late morning onwards. Perhaps not quite as intense as the downpours later today, but nevertheless still some pretty lively showers moving through on a brisk breeze for most of tomorrow. A little drier perhaps in the south, where temperatures again getting into the low 20s, for most high teens.